The Committee on Appointments to order at 8 a.m. We have a significant portion of appointments this morning. Good morning, fellow commissioners. So let's get right into them. Okay, our first item on our agenda today is a resolution confirming Mayor LeGrand's appointment of Edward Postma to the South Division Granville Avenue Corridor Improvement Authority.
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? It carries. Any comments?
I'll just add, I've known Mr. Postma for several years at this point. His organizations have been extremely involved in that neighborhood, serving many of the neighbors through healthcare. And so I'm just excited. He's had a desire to get more involved and serve in some additional capacity. So I'm happy to see this work out for him.
Oh, nice. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah.
That brings us to our second item on our agenda, a resolution confirming Mayor LeGrand's appointment of Nathan Orange to the Uptown Business Improvement District.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? It carries. Happy to see folks appointed to Uptown. Their wheels are moving, and they've got a lot of great things that they're doing right now. So the more folks that we can add and the more diverse voices we can add to that body, the better. Any other comments on that item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our third item, which is a resolution. Sure. Okie dokie. So resolution confirming Mayor LeGrand's appointment of Danielle Ellis to the Community Relations Commission.
So moved.
Oh,
Support.
and we'll do comments before we move. We'll switch that around this morning. Any comments on that before we vote?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner.
Thank you. I had just asked Ms. Bosker about looking at the demographic makeup of this body. At the end of last year, there was what we felt was a higher percentage of those that were outside of the city that were reflective on this body. Ms. Bosker correctly pointed out that there is the detail accompanying each memo item, so thank you for that reminder. And so I think with each one of these, obviously we'll go through these. We'll end up with 2 that are from the 2nd ward, the current makeup, right, Ms. Bosker? 5 from the 3rd ward, 3 that are outside of the city, and 1 that's from the 1st ward. And so, sometimes these size of bodies, just wanting to keep that in mind when we think about individuals to join on the board. I think we all certainly want to advocate to make sure that we have a good makeup of individuals from our respective wards. So I just wanted to point that out. I don't know. So then after this, all these ones, Ms. Bosker, obviously the makeup will change. And then you said that we also have another vacancy as well, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
There's another appointment planned for next week from Ward 1. So then there should be 2 from Ward 1 and 2, 5 from Ward 3, 3 from outside the city.
Okay.
Which is more city representation, more evenly distributed even than it has been within the city. And then there'll be 1 vacancy still that the mayor will consider.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I just wanted to highlight that since that was sort of a carryover from last commission year. Thanks.
Commissioner, if I may, I advise the board, and I did want to say that the Community Relations Commission is one of those boards that selects their own members and then gives those recommendations to the mayor. And it's my understanding that for the most part, the mayor does approve their selection. So the commission is very aware. They look at the demographics, and I think they even went through them during the last meeting. So if there's any type of if that makes you feel any better as far as the makeup goes, I just wanted to let you know that. And but they are just very happy to have people to serve on this board.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate that. Yeah, that I know their process is quite rigorous compared to some other bodies. There's an interview process, and then it gets fed in. And so, no, thanks for sharing that perspective.
And thank you, Commissioner, for lifting that up, of just continuing to think of what is the makeup and how can we continue to have diverse voices, and equal ward representation is important, and I'll keep that in mind. And I know that a good portion of our appointments are mayoral, right? So to continue to let the mayor know that as well, I will. Let's move to our fourth item here, which is a resolution confirming.
Oh, did we?
Oh, pardon me, thank you. Okay, so do we have a motion? Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? It carries. All right, and then, so introduce, then talk, then vote. Changing my order a little bit. Okay, so our next item here is a resolution confirming Mayor LeGrand's appointment of John Laporto to the Community Relations Commission.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor?
Nope, then comments.
Oh.
Now we discuss.
Get there. Any comments?
Yeah.
Good. Okie dokie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, those opposed? It carries. Okay, to our fifth item here, resolution confirming Mayor LeGrand's appointment of Catherine White to the Community Relations Commission.
So
Any
moved.
comments? Nope.
So
Okay.
it's moved in, then I'll support.
Support? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? It carries. To our sixth item here, a resolution confirming Mayor LeGrand's appointment of Richard Wilbert to the Community Relations Commission. Any comments on that item?
So moved.
So moved, supported. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Carries. All right, and can you scroll down for me a little bit? Thank you. And, all right, did we skip over Catherine White? No?
Nope, we
Okie
didn't.
dokie. All right, so now we're on Stephen. All right, item number 7, a resolution confirming Mayor LeGrand's appointment of Stephen Fellows to the Grand Rapids Historical Commission.
So moved.
Support.
All right, any comments?
Nope.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? It carries. All right. Second to last here, our last item here, resolution confirming Mayor LeGrand's appointment of Jeffrey Seitzma to the Grand Rapids Historical Commission.
Stephen Staggs.
Oh, pardon me. Thank you.
Stevens again.
Almost, yeah. It sure did. Pardon me. Yeah, they are spelled differently. That's funny. Okay. Item number 8, a resolution confirming Mayor LeGrand's appointment of Stephen Staggs to the Grand Rapids Historical Commission.
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. Comments?
Yeah, just quickly. So we had a longtime member of the Historical Commission, stepped down, Mr. Wilson. And we've had these kind of hanging out there. There was a couple of them hanging out there. So this is kind of nice that filling that board back up again.
Wonderful. Thank you. And it's an interesting body, Historical Commission. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? It carries. And second to last year, a resolution confirming Mayor LeGrand's appointment of Jeffrey Seitzma to the Grand Rapids Historical Commission.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Any comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? It carries. And lastly, that brings us to our current board and vacancies list. Any comments on the vacancies that we have? I do have a comment, but I will recognize Commissioner Isasi.
Thank you. I just wanted to share, I was talking to Ms. Bosker before we started. I serve on the Civil Service Board, and so we do have a board member who will be resigning, or I'm sorry, termed out at the end in the May meeting. So we meet this month and we meet in May. So I'll be working with her to identify that as a city commission appointment. So typically we're looking for somebody either with like an employment law background, a human resources background, somebody who may have some contract negotiations background. And I do believe those ones, there are residency requirements associated with those, and I believe that one is a third ward vacancy.
I'm not sure.
Okay, so we'll double check on that, but I wanted to highlight that one. Just that body does have quite a bit of work going on right now, given the compensation study. So that one will be a priority focus for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Knight, excuse me, Mr. Robbins.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just talking with our director from Mobile GR this morning on the way up. I know with my replacement going to Mayor LeGrand on the Mobile GR Commission, I believe there might be one left from the first ward. on this body. But either way, I just made note to her and wanted to put it out to the public too that we would love to see some more applicants from the first ward. So
From Opal GR?
yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
they're doing some good work, so that's a good note there. My note is on the Affordable Housing Fund Board. I did speak with Mrs. Behrens about this, and she's going to give me some feedback on what we've discussed in previous meetings of what's missing and what expertise would be good to add to that board. So we are still in conversation on that and hope to bring you all some feedback soon on our city commission appointment. And then Commissioner Perdue and I are still awaiting some more PIFs and some folks to apply for the third ward appointment. Any further comments from staff or commissioners? All right, now this is a long meeting for us, but we will adjourn at 8:11 a.m. Have a good morning.
30 shall not exceed 30 years. The bonds will be secured by the credit of the city, and the annual debt service will be paid by the Kent County Lodging Excise Tax. Additionally, the Convention and Arena Authority will also fund a debt service reserve account that will equal 150% of the average annual debt service of the bond. This is done as a means to mitigate risk to the city in the event that in any given year the lodging excise tax revenues should be unable to service the debt on those bonds.
Great, thanks. I see Ms. Behrens at the podium. Is there anything you want to add?
Just here if there's any questions about the arrangement with the county and
All
the
right.
CAA.
Okay, I'll turn to my colleagues. Is there any questions or comments on this one?
No.
No? Okay. I'll just add to and reiterate that while the city is issuing these bonds, we are not the ones that are paying for them out of our own money, and that this the debt service is coming from the Kent County Lodging Excise Tax Fund. So I know that's something that we've got some questions on in the past, and there's lots of good information in the memo as mentioned too. So,
Commissioner, just one question here,
Yes.
if I may. I just want to confirm $128 million. That's the like the face value or principal value. Do we have any estimate just on the total cost associated with the bonds over the 30-year maturity, like with all the interest payments? Do we have an estimate of that?
I don't have that in front of me today, but I can certainly make that available.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be good, Deputy CFO. I just think it's a good number to be transparent on the total costs associated with debt financing. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
yep, that's a good question. Thank you for that. All right, hearing no other questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. That'll bring us to item number 2. We've got our bid list resolution for March 11, 2025.
So move.
Support.
All right, moved and supported.
Yes, this morning we do have only 5 items on the bid list resolution before you. I would characterize those items as standard type items, but am available for any questions.
Okay, questions, colleagues, comments? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That carries. That'll bring us to item number 3. We've just got our comptroller's warrant report for the period of February 11, 2025 through February 24th, 2025 in the amount of $26,041,909.61 and monthly travel. And we do not need a motion for this one.
Correct.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
For the period reference there, we released cash payments totaling approximately $26 million. That amount includes just under $5.5 million for our employee payroll expense and just over $166,000 for income tax warrants. In terms of quantity, 854 income tax refunds were issued and 1,007 accounts payable checks and electronic payments were issued. These funds were not issued for payment by individuals in the office of the city comptroller, not in accordance with the terms of the city charter. The second report that we have here this morning is our monthly travel report for January fiscal year to date. And that details travel spend by department, and that report is showing that we've spent $964,000, or about 28% of the overall annual budget. And those are the 2 reports that I have for you this morning.
Okay, any questions or comments on that one, colleagues?
Remind me again, City Comptroller, how quickly payments go out to vendors. that are in our system. Because I've gotten a couple of inquiries as of late about people who have been waiting on payments from last year, still have not received them.
Yeah, Commissioner Knight, it's a great question. I think I've been getting some of those inquiries too, and I think the first thing to understand, it's very dependent upon the recipient department for which the services were rendered. That department needs to go through, a process to create a purchase order. Once the department goes through all of that work, though, typically payments are processed by the accounts payable team very fast, either check or electronic payment. So
if the payment is held up, it's held up in the department that they've been working with.
That's correct.
Okay. Good to know.
Commissioner, may I add, because I, along with our comptroller, have had very much experience, quite a bit of experience with this. When it's departmental that way, a lot of times we don't know if something was kicked back. So as accounts payable is going through the review process, there may have not been adequate documentation or some other type of approval, and sometimes that bounces back. So really, it is relying on the staff to see if there's anything that bounced back. I work with a number of vendors, and I will actually reach out to those departments specifically just to make sure stuff processes through. But Alex Drosy and her team, she's our accounts payable supervisor, they're very good at following up. So if you have vendors that are running into that situation, by all means, reach out to the staff, because they're very responsive in trying to solve those issues.
Well, and the reason I asked is, one of these people said to me that the person in this department said to them that I owe you a check.
That's not really the best statement to make to that vendor at all, and I would be upset too.
Yeah.
Because it's not, I owe you. No, our responsibility should be making sure our bills are paid on time, and so please, by all means, reach out to the team, and they're going to be very happy to help address that and figure out what's going on.
And I'll just add real quick, if we've been, contacted, I assume, about similar situations, because I'm aware of a vendor reaching out about payments that were owed apparently from as far back as, late summer, early fall of last year. I have asked the team to, look into that and connect with the department to make sure that those verify that we do owe that vendor funds, and if so, make sure that the processing of that is expedited, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments on this one? All right, hearing and seeing none, so we will receive and file that. And then lastly, we've got our treasurer's report for period of February 11th, 2025 through February 25th of 2025.
So good morning. Can I say a lot's happened since the last meeting?
You sure can.
Right now, there's just so much turmoil going on right now, and topsy-turviness and upside down. Again, it's also trying to think through what that information is and what's valid and what isn't, and what is a fear and what is a reality. Right now, we're still showing strength, and the GDP of our economy is growing at 2.3%, so we're not seeing that stall out. It's not to say that it can't, because of the different tariffs that are being put in place and things that are happening. I think the hard part I'm finding with this whole issue when it comes to tariff is I'm hearing where a vendor from Canada was denied at the border to come across and work, and that was a very strange issue. And here I am looking to improve our IVR, which is our interactive voice response telephone system, and it's actually going to be ending a relationship with a Canadian company. However, my work with the Canadian company has been going on for over 2 years, been working on this process, so it's not related to the U.S. government action. So it really is presenting a lot of awkward conversations and awkward business relationships to try to navigate. And so really that's also impacting our work with probably our amphitheater project, our Scribner project, depending on our suppliers and how those products are coming across the border. Where are we getting our road salt? Where are we getting different things that we need for our operation? And are there going to be any delays in getting that? What if we had our utility poles are maybe manufactured in Canada? Are we going to all of a sudden see not only a run up in costs, but maybe a shortage where we can't get the product or we have to resource? those are a lot of the concerns that we have right now that we're seeing. Where we were talking about only one interest rate cut in the whole year of 2025, they're now projecting 3. And so things are changing relatively rapidly. I would like to talk to you a little bit about our portfolio, though. We have $716 million that we have in bank accounts and investments. It's earning 3.26% right now. I want to assure you that those are very, very highly rated investments. They're U.S. Treasuries, which are T-bills and T-bonds. They are U.S. agencies. It's going to escape me as I've got plenty of acronyms I'm sure I'll be able to spit out when the meeting's over. Also, high-value short-term commercial paper, which is something as investment that only is out there for 270 days, the maximum, and it's usually in our very, very strong companies that are part of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So these are very well-capitalized companies that we invest in. But we watch our portfolio daily to make sure that there's no hiccup that's going to cause any issue within our investments. And so really every one of our items is marketable today. We could call on a phone today if we see that there's trouble that we need to get out of a security, we can. It's very nimble and flexible. So I want to assure you that we keep a very close eye on that as we hear what's happening in the stock market, we hear what's happening in other parts of our economy. These investments are not tied to the stock market. It is not based on the price of a stock going up and down. These are fixed income securities where we place an investment and we know we're going to earn a specific interest rate.
Great, thanks for that. Out of curiosity, the sourcing topic that you mentioned, is the city, I guess, kind of proactively looking at alternative sourcing ahead of time just to identify like certain items that we might need to resource from the United States and just kind of keeping those like on the docket should they be impacted?
I'm sure they are. I'm sure Tony Wojciechowski in purchasing is well aware of some of these issues that are coming up, and I'm sure all of our departments are well aware of where their inventories are coming from for their basic needs, and they know who those vendors are, and so they're going to be the ones getting the notification whether there's price increases due to tariff, which we're already seeing come through in certain areas. I'm hearing it from paper suppliers. We're hearing it from different groups. So we have to be prepared for that. And, it's now a reality.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for that. Like you said, we'll continue to monitor things day by day. So I'll turn to my colleagues. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for that, Mr. Groblinski, because you answered the questions that, for me, was how nimble are we in being able to shift and move depending on what's happening in the market. So I appreciate you giving that information. I guess that's kind of what was on my mind with the bond issuance, thinking about how all of these things are shifting, how prices are going to change, especially for products and things necessary. Steel, wood, we all know that doesn't come, some of it from here, but very little, right? Mm-hmm. So we import all of that. And then so how is that, are we looking long range and thinking about how that's going to affect their ability to build, right? And then even say that gets stalled, right? So this bond is in place. That issuance back to us, even though it's coming through Kent County, it's like the trickle-down effect. And one thing's going to impact one thing and it's going to impact another thing. And I know the CAA has to hold that 150% worth of funding to cover that. But what if that impacts them, right?
It could
So
very
where
well.
does that put us?
It could very well impact them, but Ms. Behrens and her team and working with the CAA put in place a lot of stopgaps in this waterfall. We call it a waterfall. Who's the first payer, second, third, fourth? Where are these funds coming from? So it's not going to impact the city of Grand Rapids. It's not going to be our funds going into that. We rely on the CAA, their engineers, their construction companies that they work with, those folks, they're the ones that know where these costs are going to be landing. And if there's changes, they're going to be the ones that have to figure that out, because ours is a set piece. So when we say we come forward with $124.5 million, that's it. It's $124.5. That's what we committed. If the project goes above that, that's going to be up to the CAA and more than likely the private funding to figure it out.
Right.
Ours is only using our credit facility to help this deal.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question, and thanks for the information. All right, hearing and seeing no other questions, then we'll go ahead and receive and file that report. It is 8:46. We'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. And then just a quick plug, too, that our committee of the whole this morning is starting a little bit earlier as scheduled. We'll see you then.
Time is now 9:16, and we're going to go ahead and call our Community Development Committee meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We have a number of items today, so let's go ahead and get started. First is a resolution setting March 25th, 2025 as a date to consider an ordinance amending zoning map A, Downtown Height Overlay District, to add properties bounded by Leonard Street to the north, 6th Street to the south, US 131 to the west, and the Grand River to the east, to the DA-2A, I don't know how to say this word, Ms. Turkelson. Sub-area, thank you. Thank you. Do you have a motion?
So moved. Support.
All right, it's been moved and supported, and now that I'm reading it, it's very clear that it's sub-area. But I'm going to have some transparent that I just didn't know what it was, so Ms. Turkelson.
Good morning. Thank you, Commission. So this item should look somewhat familiar to at least a couple of you. Last year, you may recall that the Planning Commission recommended and you supported, the City Commission supported rezoning of several acres of property bounded by the description that you just read, Leonard Street to the north, the river, the highway, and 6th Street to the south. Unfortunately, in that item, the ordinance itself, we failed to actually include this land area in our downtown height overlay. It was very clearly communicated in all of the presentations, as well as the communication to both the community and the property owners and the businesses. I look at it more as a technical error on our part that we failed to add it to the overlay, but fortunately it was communicated appropriately. So in realizing that we needed to add this section of land to the downtown height overlay, we did bring it forward to the Planning Commission, who has recommended approval.
Great, thank you for that overview. There was a lot of work done at that time, so it is, sometimes these things are missed. I went back to some of the notes after talking with city manager, and I would fully agree with you. That was very clear. So I do agree that this is a cleanup item. Colleagues, do you have questions for Ms. Turkelson?
Just thanks for catching this. I know it's tricky when we're dealing with lots of things for zoning.
Thank you.
Thank you for your grace.
Hearing no others, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2 is a resolution scheduling a public hearing on April 15th, 2025 for programmatic agreements with the Michigan State Historic Preservation Officer, SHPO. Do you have a motion?
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. Ms. Bohach? Oh, there you are.
I'm here.
All right.
Good morning.
Thank you.
So this is something we bring to you on an annual basis. So this is to schedule the public hearing for our ability to enter into agreements with SHPO. Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act allows us to do this. Actually, it's HUD's responsibility, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, to carry out this function, and they are so generous to pass that down to us in the local jurisdictions. And then we have this opportunity to have these agreements, and it really provides us more local control and more ability to more timely get projects approved because we can do it on the local level.
Great. Any questions for Ms. Bohach? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3 is a resolution scheduling a public hearing on April 15th, 2025 for the draft fiscal year 2026 Consolidated Housing and Community Development Annual Action Plan, known as the Neighborhood Investment Plan Funding Recommendations. Do you have a motion?
So moved. Support.
Ms. Bohach?
And this is also an annual process where we hold a public hearing on how we allocate our resources for the Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnerships, and the Emergency Solutions Grant programs. This annual action plan, when it's developed, will cover July 1 of 2025 through June 30th of 2026. And full recommendations will be presented to the City Commission on March 25th.
Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Bohach. Item number 4 is a resolution approving grant applications in the amount of $1,312,250 to the Michigan Department of Transportation to be matched with the city's share of $950,000 in connection with preventative maintenance of various bridges.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported, Mr. Berkman.
Good morning, Commissioners. So MDOT currently has a call for projects out for fiscal year 2028 through their local bridge program. We're seeking to submit an application under that for preventive maintenance on 2 city bridges. So 6th Street over the Grand River would include a partial cleaning and coating, repairs to the pedestrian sidewalk and railing, replacement of the sidewalk deck boards that are out there currently, and repairs to the east approach. Then on Michigan over Division, we would do some deck patching and epoxy overlay, and then seal the bridge rail and substructure. Estimated total cost for this work is $2,262,250, with the estimated city share that we're putting forward in this grant application of $950,000, which, if successful, would come from the Vital Streets Fund. So your approval of this resolution would allow us to initiate that grant process.
Colleagues, questions for Mr. Berkman?
I just want to say thank you for looking. We know bridges can be a tricky issue, especially with our infrastructure. I do want you to know, I'm wondering I'm assuming with the repairs and the coating on the 6th Street Bridge, that would be looking at the ironwork as well to inspect it?
Yes, yes.
That's important because it is an old bridge, and when I was at the West Grand annual meeting recently, someone actually gave me a little beautiful ornate piece that came off of the bridge when they were walking. So it's nothing structural and to be worried about, but it's a very old ornate bridge, so I'm sure we're going to be needing to look for some things there. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you, engineering team.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just say you've been busy with these maintenance pieces for bridges. We also received some federal funding that Representative Skolton's office worked on. That's for
the East Belt Line,
right?
Bridge, correct.
So,
yes.
all right. Well, great. Hearing no other questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5 is a resolution approving an agreement with MDOT for the preventative maintenance of Pearl Street Bridge over the Grand River, Burton Street Bridge over CSX Railroad, and Hall Street Bridge over CSX Railroad, and authorizing the local share of the project costs in the amount not to exceed $410,511.
So moved. Support.
Mr. Berkman?
So we were successful with a grant award under this same program we just spoke about through MDOT. This involves preventative maintenance work on the Pearl Street Bridge over the Grand River, Burton and Hall bridges over the CSX Railroad. So the work will consist of some substructure repairs, epoxy overlay, sealer, curb and gutter work, deck and sidewalk patching. So the resolution before you approves the MDOT agreement for the work to occur and authorizes our local match of $410,511, which was based on the project estimate. Now, foreshadowing a couple of items later on in your agenda, we often bring these MDOT grant or MDOT award agreements to you in advance of the bids being opened, and then sometimes the timing of the bid opening happens after we've finalized the agenda item. So the bids were received on Friday, March 7th, and the low bid amount was just under $1.2 million, which was about $400,000 over estimate. We're still reviewing those bids, but there were 2 bidders, and the subsequent low bidder was another $915,000 higher. So we do believe that the low bid is worth pursuing, and we're working on that through MDOT. The city share is only a percentage, so there may be sufficient funding in the contingency that we have included in this item, but we may also need to return at a future meeting date to request an increased authorization as well. The Vital Streets Fund will provide the local share for this project.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Berkman on this item?
Thanks for catching that. It's important.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item number 6 is a resolution approving a construction agreement and accepting 2 public utilities easements for Jefferson Farms East.
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Berkman?
So there's a private development in Kentwood consisting of 39 single-family homes that'll be served with sewer and water by city utilities. Development's located north of 52nd Street and east of Wing Avenue, so requesting your approval of our standard construction agreement and acceptance of the utilities easements that'll give the city rights to maintain those utilities once installed.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Support?
Aye.
Any opposed?
That's an aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 7 is a resolution awarding a contract with Owens Ames Kimball Company for improvements to the Grand River East Riverfront Phase 1 US 131 to the CSX Railroad in the amount of $15,020,504 with a total amount not to exceed $17,970,196.
So moved.
Support?
Moved and supported?
So this will be a significant enhancement along our east riverfront, specifically between the railroad tracks and 131, adjacent to the amphitheater, Acrisure Amphitheater, currently under construction. Project will include a half-mile river edge pathway, 4.5 acres of green space, expansive seating areas overlooking the river, water access through a kayak launch that will be included, and it will also serve as an additional access point to the west gate of the amphitheater. 4 bids were received on February 11th, and OAK provided that low bid that was read of $17.2 million, or actually that wasn't read. The $17,253,778 was $4.7 million over estimate. Given that that low bid was significantly over the project budget, the city met with our partners at DGRI and our consultant to review multiple options to adjust the scope on the project. Based on that review, we recommended removal of certain amenities that would include things like swing benches, some pavers, and a catenary lighting system from the project. There's still an opportunity to re-add those at a point in the future if we determine additional funding is available, but those adjustments resulted in a post-bid addendum with OAK to the amount that was read of $15,020,504, and we're recommending that that be awarded. So seeking your approval of that contract award with a total not to exceed of $17,970,196 to come primarily from the Greenway grant funding that was obtained by DGRI in the amount of $16.8 million, with the remainder coming from capital improvement, ARPA funds, as well as some flood wall bond funds for that project.
Thanks for that overview. Colleagues, questions for Mr. Berkman on this item?
I have one, Chair.
Yes.
So in the memo, it mentions that due to funding requirements, no micro-local business enterprise bid discounts were available. Can you say more about those funding requirements?
Sure. So the ARPA dollars that are involved prevent us from utilizing the bid discount program. That doesn't mean that it's not something that we weren't still encouraging or still tracking. And so we did review the bids, and there were no MLBEs located, which are involved in those that provided bids, which the team was disappointed in seeing. We did go through some extensive efforts on the front end of this project. In particular, earlier in the fall, we held an event at GRPS's Southwest Middle High School, which was intentional about showcasing many of the projects that were coming, including this one, as far as opportunities to engage local contractors, try to build relationships, let them know what to expect, with the intent of seeing greater involvement, but ultimately that wasn't realized. Looking into it, it may have been a result of capacity. There weren't many categories involved for which there were a number of MLBEs registered, and so just continuing to grow that program, I think, should be a focus moving forward, but we were disappointed in the results on that end.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Berkman? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our next item is item number 8, which is a resolution awarding a contract with Analon Corporation for reconstruction of Fuller Avenue from Kalamazoo Avenue to Boston Street in the amount of $1,829,227 with a total amount not to exceed $2,462,000.
So moved.
Support?
Mr. Berkman?
Yes, so there are actually portions of this segment between Kalamazoo and Adams that will be reconstructed, and the segment in the middle to be resurfaced. Bike lanes will be added as part of this project, along with water main being replaced, sewers being separated. There's some sidewalk repair and curb extensions involved to shorten the crosswalks, ADA-compliant curb ramps, and the net addition of 37 street trees. Anlon did provide that low bid amount that was read of $1.8 million, which was about $100,000 under the engineer's estimate. So seeking your approval of the award to Anlon with that total not to exceed $2,462,000. The tentative start date on this project is March 31st, and they have 98 days to complete the work by the contract.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Bergman?
How did the engagement session go last week?
The community meeting, the pre-construction meeting, there's been a number of them happening, so I'm trying to recall the specifics on that one. But in general, we've been having good engagement with folks attending those. Obviously, the intent is to let them know what's coming. This is one of the projects that will also be featured at Commission Night Out with additional details, and also with the city sharing some of our efforts around increased engagement and enhanced communication associated with the work involved this upcoming construction season.
That's great. Thank you.
Hearing no other questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item number 9 is a resolution authorizing the increase of $1 million in expenditures with contracts for as-needed asbestos and lead abatement at various locations with a total amount not to exceed $3 million. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Bergman?
So this is one of our as-needed contracts that we utilize for asbestos and lead abatement. We must contract directly for this work since it's considered a hazardous material, so it's not something that we can have our general contractors on projects sub out. When we initiate contracts like this, we don't know the full amounts that we'll be utilizing because it varies and is dependent upon projects that come over the term of the agreement. We brought an item before you in September of last year, increasing the authorization to $2 million, but at that time noted it may be necessary to seek additional funding in the future, and we are at that point. So with the anticipated removals required with the 1500 Scribner facility, as well as some needs associated with the fire department's training facility, we're requesting an increase of $1 million in this authorization. The amounts utilized under the authorization then get charged to those specific project budgets for which those services are required.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Bergman?
Well, thank you for clarifying that. That's all I wanted to, because that was my question, to make sure we have the budget.
Right.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 10 is a resolution approving an increase of $289,810 for State Street from Lafayette to Madison for a total local not to exceed $1,841,195.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Mr. Bergman?
So this is one of those items I alluded to earlier in terms of the MDOT agreement being approved in August of 2023 for this project, but then bids were received a few days later, September 1st of 2023. The work includes new brick pavement, which is installed now, curb and gutter, water main, new sewers, ADA ramps, street trees, and bike lanes on this segment of State Street between Lafayette and Madison. When bids were received by MDOT, the low bid of $1.86 million was about $470,000 over the estimate. Much of the work has been completed, so we've utilized contingencies that were previously authorized to cover some of this overage, but now requesting your approval of an increase of $289,810, which would be the local share required to complete the remaining work, much of that being outside of the curb line, so it would not impact traffic. And that amount will come from the Vital Streets Fund.
Questions for Mr. Bergman?
Just a question, really on background around the brick pavement. Is there a special designation for this strip and for the strips of Wealthy and other parts of Heritage Hill that have the brick pavement?
There are segments that are within historic districts, and I believe State Street is. So we had to work with that office in designing and planning for this project. Wealthy Street, offhand, I don't think it is, but we do have a policy where the street material, which in both cases is brick, that we seek to replace that and retain that character for that area.
Great, thank you.
And thanks for the update about the timing, because I was going to say, I thought I just drove down State Street and hopped into the parking lot of the Parks and Rec office. So I'm glad that that's back open. All right, all those in favor?
Support. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 11 is a resolution approving an increase of $86,790 for the agreement with MDOT and authorizing expenditures in an amount not to exceed $335,130 for the local share of costs for the installation of rectangular rapid flashing beacons at various locations. Do you have a
Did you move?
Yep.
Oh, I missed it. Thank you. Support.
It's been moved and supported. Thank you. Mr. Berkman?
So after all of these items, we do plan to have a conversation with MDOT about timing. But just so you know, I mean, so there is a clock that they need the agreement back, and then that doesn't always align with the bid clock. And so these are two examples of where we need it to come back. So this is the installation of rectangular rapid flashing beacons at 6 locations: Leonard and North, Alpine and Myrtle, Chavez and Rumsey, MLK Junior and Lafayette, Plymouth and Griggs, and Burton and Rosewood. We approved the agreement with MDOT on October 8th of last year. Then bids were received on November 1st. The bids came in over, and so we're seeking an increase of $86,790, which will come from the Vital Streets Traffic Safety Fund to cover that gap.
Great. Questions for Mr. Berkman?
How did you all come up with the 6 locations?
We worked with our partners at Mobile GR, who I know are often analyzing and gauging where these improvements are needed, probably based on input and feedback. But is there anything else that you could add to that, Ms. Smith?
We also use traffic crash data all over the city, and we look for lack of a better term, hotspots where we're seeing needs. But we do a lot of community engagement. For example, last night we were in a meeting with folks over in the second ward, I think. I'm still getting my bearings, but we were working with some folks to see some issues around in the Kalamazoo area. Somebody can correct me about what ward I was in last night, and we were talking through where some improvements could be made for safety. So it's meetings like that. It's also looking at crash data and seeing where the needs are all over the city, and they're long lists ongoing.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
I think you were in the 3rd if you're on Kalamazoo, but
thank you.
The 2 in here in the 3rd, they feel really spot on, particularly the MLK and Lafayette. It's a pretty busy crosswalk. And I will add the Kalamazoo. There's some real issues, particularly with that bend, if that's what y'all were talking about. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, these items, I'll add to Commissioner Perdue's comments. Will these, I think, just highlight, we're going to have that commission night out at our next commission meeting on the 25th or the 26th. I get the date wrong. The 25th. Thank you. Thank you. See, I knew you were here for a reason, City Clerk. And I love that we're going to be talking about this item that, it's probably something we don't think about it until it impacts us. Will these locations be highlighted as well? Because to your point, when I was listening to those, I thought the same thing. I was like, because I had asked you about another crosswalk, so.
So we flagged 6 projects to particularly highlight, and that was chosen more based on what the level of impact would be in terms of driving, detours. These can be done largely under traffic. So we have a list of all projects that'll be on there, but this wasn't one of the 6.
Okay. All right. People will be happy to hear that. So.
Yeah.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our last item is a resolution, item number 12, a resolution scheduling a public hearing for March 11th, 2025 at 2 p.m. to consider a bond issuance for the Colorado Health Facilities Authority regarding the property at 2510 Lake Michigan Drive Northwest.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Mackenzie, right? Mackenzie,
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Today's public hearing is an accommodation by the city to satisfy the requirements for the issuance of the bonds by the Colorado Health Facilities Authority. The city is acting as a conduit, and the aggregate principal amount that is not to exceed $180 million includes proposals all across Michigan, California, Colorado, Florida, and Illinois. And these dollars will finance, reimburse, or refinance projects. So not only for the city of Grand Rapids, but for Covenant across the country. Bond counsel for the city, Jessica Wood, is here to answer any questions that you guys might have ahead of the public hearing that's scheduled for this afternoon.
Thanks, Mackenzie. I think this item was just something that we found through the general work of this coming before us, that it was not only located here in Michigan, but in other locations. And so that's why this is coming before us. And yes, today is March 11th. So any questions for Mackenzie or for Jessica? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. And with that, it's now 9:40. We can go ahead and adjourn our community development. Oh, pardon me?
Just say committee of the whole starting in 5 minutes.
Oh, and the community of the whole is going to start in 5 minutes at 9:45 a.m.
The Committee of the Whole, first item on our agenda is a resolution scheduling a special meeting of the City Commission on May 6. That is for initial work on the budget. And it looks like Mr. Canfield wants to talk to us, or is he just working the microphone?
Just working the PowerPoints.
Do we need a motion? I will, thank you. I'll support.
So just a context here, this is simply so that we can do budget planning. It's not on our regular agenda, so we have to have a specific vote on it. Don't know that we need a lot of conversation, but if anyone's feeling particularly talkative this morning, they can talk on this. Seeing no interest in discussion, then all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Second, resolution setting March 25th as a date to consider an ordinance amending various sections of the zoning ordinance. And Ms. Turkelson, can you come up perhaps? And I'll have to take a motion for that.
Support.
Good morning. Thank you. You moved a little quicker on me. Sorry about that. Just going to pull up a very brief presentation here to help guide through the proposed text amendments that the Planning Commission has forwarded to the City Commission for consideration. There's a variety of reasons why we put forward zoning text amendments. Part of it is based on decision-making of both the Board of Zoning Appeals or through city staff as we grant what we call administrative departures, which are a staff-level variance process, if you will. Also changing trends or when we realize there might be errors or ease of administration as we administer the zoning ordinance itself. So these, I guess, 4 areas of amendments are a merge of all of those reasons that I've just mentioned. For example, the basement egress window, a number of cases have been brought before the Board of Zoning Appeals, who has provided some pretty consistent decision-making and granting variances to allow for window wells to be closer to the lot line than what the underlying zoning ordinance is. The second bucket is specific to front yard parking. The third bucket is to reinstate building element requirements that were inadvertently removed based on a past amendment, and then allowing for more flexibility for the placement of solar panels. So I've just got a brief slide highlighting each. I mentioned that the Board of Zoning Appeals has some pretty consistent decision-making relative to variances to allow for window wells to be closer to the lot line than what the zoning ordinance would otherwise allow. So this provides the staff the flexibility to grant those departures of that variance in lieu of having a more complicated process by making application to the Board of Zoning Appeals and of course the fees that go along with that. So this would allow provide that guidance to city staff to allow for window wells to be set back a minimum of at least 1 foot from the lot line instead of the 3 feet. The second element is also derived from consistent decision-making of the Board of Zoning Appeals. What we're finding, especially with some of our smaller businesses, is that historically they were built with some parking in a front yard, and that's defined as between the building and the street. And so, especially on some of our smaller office businesses, for example, depending on when they were built, they do have a lot of parking in the front yard. And now what we're finding is as time comes and those parking lots need to be reconstructed, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to do it under the current zoning to replace that parking without a variance process. And again, since the Board of Zoning Appeals seemed comfortable with allowing that reconstruction of some of these smaller lots, we felt like it would be appropriate for us to give city staff the authority to allow for that replacement. 2020 Monroe is a recent example, and I think it's pretty illustrative, where you can see parking there in the, what would that be, the southwest corner of the site. All of that parking, those spaces, would not be allowed to be built without a variance. And so today, it would be allowing that parking to be replaced administratively to support the business that's located at that location. The third I mentioned is reinstating some requirements that were inadvertently removed back sometime last year when we updated or streamlined the height bonuses within the city center and transitional city center zone districts and specific to the Grand River overlay. So we inadvertently lost the building element requirements, parking requirements, and landscape requirements. And those are pretty critical. They're pretty important as those elements are very specific to moving forward the goals and objectives of both the city's community master plan, the River for All plan, and the GR Forward plan. So that's not a policy shift from past decisions of the City Commission. That's just reinstating the requirements. And then lastly, solar energy, that has been a topic of conversation. Previously, there was a policy that didn't allow for solar panels to be on the street-facing side of the roof. And through a lot of conversation, we've eventually allowed it as what we call administrative departure. And then this is going a step further to eliminate that process and simply allow for rooftop panels to exist on a structure no matter where it is based on the appropriate energy collection systems of the structure. And so this is an element that aligns really well with the recommendations of the Community Master Plan. And I know our Sustainability Office is also championing this change as it helps with our Soul Smart certification. So I believe that concludes my presentation of the amendments that are being recommended unanimously by your City Planning Commission.
Great. Any questions, Commissioner Purdue?
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for finding these opportunities to make it easier, to provide ease in process. I'm also curious about if there's any cost savings, particularly for the small business and residential related items. Will there be any cost savings by allowing some of these solar panels by right, or allowing the administrative process as opposed to another process? You kind of have an idea of what that will be to consumers, providers?
Yeah, absolutely. So variances, going back to the front yard parking component, would be significant. Variance processes, the application fee is, I believe, $2,200, not to mention the time that it would take to put together an application, which is typically done in this case by a civil engineer. So there's pretty significant cost savings associated with this particular amendment, both in time and application and professional designs to get through that process. And that would be true with the basement egress window wells as well. By eliminating that variance process is a significant several hundred dollars for window wells. Pardon me. The solar panels, moving that from what we call an administrative departure, the staff level variance, to a by right allowance. I believe our departures are about $100 or so, $200. Thank you. And so that would be a cost savings not having that process.
Okay, thank you so much.
Commissioner Belcheck.
Really appreciate all of this work. Thank you for that. I am also very happy to see the changes on allowing solar by right. Are there zoning or planning commission thoughts about that we can add also about sometimes if there's any barriers for the facing sides of the house, not just the roof?
I don't believe that was part of the discussion.
Is that a problem that we're encountering at all in any plans?
It hasn't been an issue that's been brought forward. The concerns have largely been about roof-mounted panels.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I guess I have one comprehensive question. I look at all of these, and at least let's talk about, I'm not the Grand River overlay, but the others. I always want to ask why everything shouldn't be of right. You've got pretty clear criteria for the window wells, and allowing those to be an administrative departure makes sense, but I guess I'm wondering, I'm not seeing the counterfactual. Given that you have criteria there, why would staff need to think about that if you can come in and say, look, I've got a window well, it's a foot away from, I mean, we're not worried about losing children down window wells, I wouldn't imagine. I'm not sure what the need is for staff analysis there. And so if you could speak to that, and similarly then the, the parking, like you've given clear criteria, like it has to be an existing building. You're not walking in and saying, I want to put my building at the back. We're talking about parking it where we already have an existing building. And so given that the criteria are very, very clear, why use staff resources even reviewing? Why not let those be of right?
Sure. I mean, that's certainly a policy consideration for you. The recommendation to have that pause was to evaluate whether there was maybe less intrusive locations on the site because of some of the narrow setbacks and the proximity of an existing structure to a lot line. The placement of a window well in a side yard could conceivably take up that entire side yard, and then it makes difficulty more in maintenance of the lawn. It's certainly doable, but I think that there was general support to provide window wells in what we would have considered a more appropriate location. And so having that additional pause to say, well, maybe what we would have considered a more appropriate location isn't feasible based on the layout of the basement, the utilities within the basement, but that's certainly a policy consideration that the Planning Commission considered.
So if we were to, this is a recommendation from planning. If we were to decide, for example, window wells were of right, is this the moment where I have to do something, or are we simply teeing this up for a hearing right now?
This would be the moment where you would want to make some of those adjustments, whether you wish to send it back to Planning Commission for additional consideration around that nuance or that change from administrative departure to by right. So you're setting ordinance consideration for the 25th, so.
Okay.
I mean, just point of clarity. So right now, what we're being asked is to proceed with the hearing. If the city commission wanted to make changes post-hearing, that would be permissible, but not to make the changes prior. If they want to make changes prior, they would simply not allow the hearing and send it back to the planning commission, ask them to reconsider the recommendations.
So there wasn't a hearing scheduled for this particular item, at least initially. Certainly the city commission could do that, but this was scheduled for ordinance consideration on the 25th.
Okay.
Sorry, you're right. Okay. You're right. Correct. Okay. So going back again, so the options would be to either make changes prior to the ordinance consideration, or send it back to the planning commission for reconsideration.
Yes.
Okay.
Got it. Well, I guess I'd like to hear the sense from my colleagues, but when in doubt, I would like things to be simpler and easier for people to build, because time is money and we have an affordability crisis generally, and we all know this. So particularly on window wells, it seems to me, people put in window wells for a very specific reason. They want people to be able to sleep in a basement. So that is a housing capacity issue. And I think the more we can do to make housing affordable for people, the happier we're going to be. And I understand that this is a great change, but I don't see any reason not to go further. I don't see that there's a real risk to letting people, we do zero lot line to the front of lots a lot these days. We do it on commercial properties. I think in general, just my philosophy on this is I would like to get rid of, for example, lot ratio requirements require you to have a certain amount of grass on your land relative to the size of your house. I would like to get rid of requirements that impose costs on people like driveway requirements. I'd actually like to get rid of foundation requirements for buildings as long as there's no actual safety issue. So I think there's a longer conversation here, but I think that this is a great moment where, at least on this discrete issue, we could just say, you have a right to do it. Now, if somebody, it just gets rid of one more bureaucratic hoop, and I think that a world where we have of right permitting simply also speeds up timelines. It means you can just move forward, and I think moving towards a world where we do faster permitting, unless someone can think of a reason why we might say, oh my gosh, that's terrible, and I'm just not seeing it for either of those things, given that the criteria are very clear. Commissioner Eustachy.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Golson. I support the sentiment. I would say, because this came from Planning Commission, I would like to, I would ask that if we weren't going to have a hearing, it was to consider it. I don't know when the next Planning Commission meeting is.
We're not having a hearing. The next Planning Commission meeting is next week. However, if you're suggesting that remanding it.
No, I think, I'm sorry. You asked your question. To make sure I'm understanding it.
If the desire is to have them reconsider and provide you with an additional recommendation, that would probably be the second meeting in April.
The second meeting in April, okay. I do think, again, I'll say I agree with the sentiment, Mayor. I think that was really when we started the changes to the zoning code last year, that was what we were looking at. I also want to respect what their role is in all of this, and would ask that it go back to them for consideration. So that's what I would suggest.
Great. I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think the people in planning do, important work, and honoring their part of this process is certainly important. And there are people who care about this a lot and think about this a lot. And frankly, they're moving the ball. They may have, I think sometimes you can think all right, let's move one step because we know where we want to get. And they may well come back and say, you're right, we can move two. Let's move two. So, but I think sending it back to them procedurally I'd certainly support that too. Commissioner Robbins?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I agree as well. I think whatever we can do to remove a barrier to people getting additional housing in the community is something that we ought to strongly consider. I guess I don't know, it's speculative at this point, but I don't know how many cases or what percentage of cases would have to go through a more robust discussion of a better location for an egress window, and really what's the value of the time spent having that discussion versus just letting them have it by right, even if it might not be the most ideal location. So I think makes sense to send it back to Planning Commission too for discussion and revisiting that, but support the sentiment 100%.
Yeah, and I also think unless we think there's a reason that we really need to micromanage this for people. I'm just thinking when I drew out my own garages and ADU, I knew where I wanted windows and I had reasons for it, and I don't really want to get in an argument with somebody about whether I want a window over my sink in my kitchen. I laid it out so I could have a window over the sink in the kitchen, and that's where I want a window. So we could talk about whether that's the best place for it, but then you're getting into my decisions. So maybe your son really decided or your daughter really decided she wanted to live in the front of the basement, and that's why you want the window wall there. Well, why have to explain that to planning that your family wants X, Y, or Z, unless there's a compelling public policy argument. So I would make a movement. I guess the movement, we've got this up for, we got a motion and support. So I would ask for perhaps a motion to
postpone?
To postpone? Is that what we want to do?
Postpone it.
Will that simply send it back to?
I don't know.
Clerk, help me out here.
That would be a future consideration, right?
Correct. So a motion to postpone would be to postpone setting a public hearing if you want the Planning Commission to do something differently.
But it wasn't a public hearing. It was for us to.
Correct, to set a public hearing. So, yeah, if you want to postpone
it was setting ordinance consideration, not a public hearing.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
So if we want to send it back to planning.
Public hearing.
Sorry.
Given that we have a motion and support, how do we send this back to public hearing?
So you can have
pardon me, planning. Do we get a motion to amend or?
So the issue to give it the consideration, if you want to send it back to the Planning Commission, you can just send it back to the Planning Commission.
Because really then we're making a change to what is in the the consideration to what you were saying, Mayor, so.
Right, but do we need a motion for that? How do we act as a body to do that? That's my question. We got a motion on the floor, which has been seconded to approve these, so.
Do we?
I thought the motion was, point of order, the motion is to postpone.
I haven't made the motion. We were considering it to, well, you were just asking that question, right? I didn't actually I was like, should we be postponing?
No, I get that, but I think before we started discussion, we had a motion and support.
Yes.
Just to
Yeah.
do these 4 things.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I think you should vote on your motion that would set the date, and if that doesn't want to approve, everybody would deny it, then you would then just direct the staff to go back to planning.
So if we all understand, voting against this motion doesn't mean we're nasty. It means that we want to send it back to planning, right? We're not saying this is all a terrible thing. We're saying, let's send it back to planning. Okay. Got it. Commissioner Perdue.
Just from a point of discussion, procedurally, I don't think this needs to go back to Planning Commission. It seems this change is small enough and in line with the original spirit of planning to make things easier. And I know from past conversations, there's always been a wondering of how far can we go with our recommendations. And so it seems like this is an easy change. It's in the direction that Planning Commission was headed. And ultimately, it's our decision to approve to approve or to amend what they recommend to us. So I support the not yet motioned amendment to go further with the egress item, but I don't think this needs to go back to Planning Commission.
Got it. And as probably all my colleagues know, I always err on the side of impatience, so emotionally I'm with you. However, I also understand Commissioner Yassasi's, maybe I'm mischaracterizing, but instinct for courtesy for our colleagues and people who are doing the work. So I'm in favor of this going back to planning.
I just have a question.
Even though it takes more time.
Mr. Carlson, did the Planning Commission hold a public hearing on these as well?
Yes, they do.
Okay, was there public comment on this section?
No, there was not.
Okay, I'm just curious about because there was a public hearing as far as the Planning Commission process, so I don't know if that changes how we.
I think if they didn't have any public comment, then they're, I think they're pretty broadly, they've considered this with no public comment. I think they can probably come back and make a modification of a recommendation without having to have a hearing again to have people's comments when they've already asked for comments about the topic. But that's on them, not us, I suppose.
Yeah, the Planning Commission would hold a second public hearing, which we can schedule for, unlike the City Commission, we do schedule the Planning Commission's public hearings. I would also note that, I think to Commissioner Perdue's point, this does move in the right direction of making things easier. And just to be clear, yes, it is an additional process, but it happens simultaneously with the permit. So it's not like it takes an additional weeks. All of these, the permit and the administrative departure happen simultaneously. And so it does streamline from what we currently have significantly, both in time and as well as in cost.
And I appreciate that. It's true, of course, having been through the process, that it's still possible that they say, why don't you do X instead? And that's because it's administratively approved. It's not of right.
And my other, not to make your motions more complicated, but if there is only a desire for the Planning Commission to reconsider the administrative departure process specifically to window wells and front yard parking, perhaps the City Commission could continue to move forward with the Grand River overlay and the solar panel component of the recommendation.
Good point.
I actually was going to ask that question.
All right.
Thank you
so
for that.
I'd entertain a motion to amend our decision so that we approve the Grand River
Set the
change
ordinance
and
consideration.
pardon, yes. And what was the fourth? I'm sorry, looking at my list.
Solar.
And the solar. So I'd ask for, is there any motion to amend?
I'll make the motion to amend that we go ahead to approve the consideration for the 2 items with the solar panels and the building requirements for the Grand River overlay, to reinstate those. And then we are sending back, to make the recommendation that we are sending back the front yard. We're not sending back the front yard ones?
I would just make the motion of what we want to approve now, because then that could get muddied.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for the clarity. So that's my motion then, is to approve the two items.
Great.
I'll support that.
Okay.
Point of information. There's 4 total items.
2 items.
No, those we're sending back to planning. Parking and parking and windows. Yep. Got it. City manager? You with us?
Just for clarity, so we are, the solar item we are approving and the overlay district today. All right.
Okay.
I have a question, Mayor. What's the thinking about setting back the front yard? We had discussion on the window well item, but what's the thinking behind not proceeding with the front yard parking at this time?
Again, that this would be of right, given the criteria are very clear, you wouldn't be able to come in and say, I want to build a building in the back of my parking lot. This is for pre-existing buildings to have parking in the front yard. If the criteria is clear enough, I don't see a need for it to have, again, city approval. You could just be of right. And then, if staff says you don't fit the criteria, well, then you don't have it of right. But if you fit the criteria, then there shouldn't have to be staff approval for that either, because it's an organic making do with a city that's already here. Like, I think part of the strengths of cities are we already have stuff. So this is allowing people to use buildings and stuff that's already out there, and we can streamline that too.
Thank you.
All right, so if we're ready for a vote, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Passes.
Now on the original motion.
Now in the original motion. All in favor of the original motion? Nobody.
Sorry, as amended. Sorry.
The original motion as amended.
We voted on the amendment, now we got to go back to the amendment.
Now in the original motion as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Groovy. Thank you, everyone. Good discussion. Thank you, Mr. Turkelson. All right, moving right along. We have what I imagine is going to be for a robust discussion, a resolution approving Commissioner Perdue going off and getting some more education on how to do our job, so that people in TV land know anytime any of us go off to a conference, it technically has to be approved. So, anyone want to fight Commissioner Perdue's attempt at self-improvement?
I heard a motion. I'll support.
All right, all in favor? Say aye. Aye. All right. And that brings us to briefings. And I would like to modify, with the Commission's support, our order of operations for a little bit. And as Ms. Behrens come up, and if we can first have a briefing on the land bank governance options and a discussion. Morning.
Morning. So we are back to have a little bit more of a conversation as requested by the City Commission at our mid-year performance report last month. So I'm just going to walk through a little bit the written materials that were provided in your packet. Mr. City Clerk, if you could pull those up on the screen as well. I will just walk you through those, and then we have a number of options we've laid out for consideration related to local land bank governance. So on October 8th, originally, the City Commission, October 8th, 2024, the City Commission established the Grand Rapids Local Land Bank, and that was allowed under some more recent changes at the state level that allows cities the size of Grand Rapids to establish their own local land bank if there isn't already one operating within the county. And so that was formed in October. Grand Rapids then became just the second city in the state of Michigan to have its own local land bank. In January, we provided an update to the City Commission on the status of that work. At the time, there was some interest expressed, or significant interest expressed, in reconsidering governance at some point, but not a specific direction given. There were interests expressed at that time about making sure that the Local Land Bank Authority Board could successfully manage transition of the existing land bank portfolio from the state, who had been providing that services for us, to the Local Land Bank Authority, and that also the board be able to act quickly and respond to opportunities that may arise as we become familiar with this tool and local control over that tool, and just making sure that we're able to take full advantage advantage of it as quickly as possible. And then interest expressed in the board, ensuring that the board, which acts both as the local land bank authority board and as the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority board, has the necessary capacity to focus on the objectives of the local land bank. So that was sort of the January conversation. Then in February, we had a couple slides on this topic at the mid-year performance presentation, and at that time, based on the comments that had been expressed in January, as well as the work in front of the local land bank board, staff recommended that the issue of governance not be revisited for a year in order to allow some of the work of the board to some of the early work of the board to be done. At that point, the commission expressed interest in talking about that in a little bit more depth, which is why we're here today, and for staff to lay out a few more options. So I want to do that, but before we jump right to the options, I did want to take a moment to talk a little bit about some of the benefits and drawbacks of having the current board governance structure. Back in the fall of last year, when we were speaking to the commission about setting up the local land bank, the question of governance wasn't one that we dwelt on a lot. Staff did recommend from the beginning that the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority be appointed as the board over the local land bank, but we did have reasons for that. It just wasn't something that came up a lot in the policy conversation, so I want to talk a little bit about the pros and cons as we've been able to articulate them ourselves and with the discussion in January with the commission. So from a benefit standpoint, having the Brownfield Authority Board act also as the board of the local land bank is one of kind of ease and speed with which that board can get moving. So the Brownfield Authority Board is obviously very familiar with our tax incentive tools. They do not need a lot of onboarding either themselves to be comfortable doing the work, or from staff to orient to what those tools are, how they can be used, and where they kind of align with the portfolio of work to be done. It also allows for some efficiency in actually making decisions about how to use the land bank properties and potentially layer those properties with other incentive tools to make those properties more attractive to the market. So when we have the same group of people acting as both boards, it's just one group of people whose questions need to be answered, whose direction can modify, versus two separate boards with full separation between people. So a little bit of streamlining there as well. And then finally, the Brownfield Authority does have a long history of working with city staff in a formal capacity as their staff as well. So the Brownfield Authority is familiar with that structure. From the drawback standpoint, I think what has been expressed by the commission and is certainly something that can come up for the individuals who are now appointed to actually act as the board for three different entities. So the Economic Development Corporation, the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, and the local land bank certainly can be a draw on those people's time, and I don't want to overlook that possibility. It's hard to say how that will play out in terms of the pace of the work that the local land bank can do. So, but do want to point that out. And then before getting to the options, I just want to lay out the work that we envision the local land bank needing to do over the next period of time and sort of into the future. And I'm going to use my hands because this is how I like to visualize it. So there's sort of the early core work. That was kind of the administrative setup. So we need to transfer the portfolio. We need to get familiar with the portfolio. We have to list it for sale. We have to maintain those properties. So the board has been entering into contracts for some of those services and will continue to do so. So that's kind of the straightforward. They needed to get the bylaws underway. That's been done. So a lot of that work is in process or actually already under the belt. And then also in that core is the responsibility to actually market the properties and field any offers for purchase that come to us. We have experience with that. The State Land Bank has been doing that function. We are now, through the local land bank, doing that function. The next tier of work is really kind of getting a little bit more active around the existing portfolio. So that's where I was talking about the layering of different tools. So these properties are in the portfolio, have been in the portfolio for a while, so that tells us there's some issue with them in terms of their marketability. And the idea is that once we get the foundational work done, we at staff and then with the board can start to look at what are those things that might be barriers to redevelopment of those properties and what can we layer on from a city standpoint, and then market the properties as kind of a layered set of incentives and zoning clarifications or title clarity, all the things that a local land bank can do. And then the third kind of outer tier and potentially more controversial tier is strategic acquisition. So local land bank does have the ability to acquire property as well, and that can, depending on kind of how that plays out in a community, can be really helpful and aligned on making the additional land bank properties kind of attractive. So you could be accumulating properties, you could be doing some other things to, again, draw investment into those land banked properties and meet the objectives that the city lays out in terms of equitable investment, housing and affordable housing being one of the key features. But it can certainly also be seen by others as sort of starting to get into the development world. So that's kind of the outer rims of the work of a local land bank. So with that framework, then, we laid out sort of three alternatives in the memo, and they're here on the screen. Mr. Clerk is gone. So there's a third alternative that's cut off by the page here, so it kind of needs to be in the middle of, but anyway, the three alternatives are to maintain the current governance with the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority acting also as the local land bank authority. The second option is to move to a separate land bank authority board that would be comprised of 5 members appointed by the mayor and approved by the city commission. And that specificity exists because that's sort of the fallback that was established both by the City Commission's resolution in October that initially appointed the Redevelopment Authority Board as the board. It said if that is rescinded, then this is the fallback. That fallback also then is memorialized in the city's agreement with the state land bank. So that would be the fallback position. Option 3 is to direct staff to seek an amendment with the state to our intergovernmental agreement, where currently the fallback is a 5-member board, to seek approval for a different number board. State law would allow a larger number. It just requires an odd number and no less than 5 members. We would need to engage in that conversation with the state. No reason to believe it wouldn't be relatively straightforward to get that agreement and bring an amendment forward, so that could be bundled together, but it is a step that we would need to take to consider a board larger than 5 members. Under either option 2 or option 3, we would recommend or ask consideration of a transition time so that the new board actually not take over its duties until no sooner than July of 2025. Again, that is to allow the current board to continue to function in some of those core purposes. So we've got some things on their agenda in March and want to be able to continue moving some of those things forward. We also will need some staff capacity to create onboarding materials for new members, and so would like to be able to do that while the existing board is still, again, kind of overseeing some of the continued startup functions. And so that will give us a little time to do that. And then it will, kind of the pace of the work that I described, the second tier and the third tier will then depend on the capacity of the new board in terms of their onboarding and when they feel comfortable sort of making some of those decisions about layering and the additional city tools. So with that, happy to answer any questions or take the Commission's direction.
So thanks, Ms. Behrens. That was a great summary, and thanks to City Manager and Ms. Behrens for continuing to work on this and respond to thoughts from the Commission. So I thought that was a great summary of the pros and cons and the options here, and I have some thoughts, and if I can beg my colleagues' indulgence, maybe I'll go first this time. I think that there was a last time there was a sort of a question of, we were sort of commingling the question of like whether this is supported by staff and integrated with the work of the economic development team, and the question of like, what does the board look like? And so I would hope that we can have a conversation about the second of those, because I think that it's at least fairly obvious to me that we should be integrating as much as possible with the economic development team at this point. We should be using our current executive director, and how things will look in 3 years, who knows? I mean, Ms. Behrens, I think you did a great job of pointing out, like, this is something where there's a core function, which is right now, we got these properties from the state. It's obvious, we can count them, we know how many we have, like, there's stuff to be done with them, and we can dream and grow, but we don't have to dream and grow all of everything right now. I think that I continue to think that this is a mechanism which may really help us with our work on wrapping our arms around meeting the scale of the need in the community for affordable housing. Because we're doing a lot of the right things. The question is whether we're doing them as fast as the need requires. So I think that absolutely we should be integrating and supporting with city staff at this point. I also think that the recommendation that we transition, if we choose to do that over time, makes a lot of sense. I will also say that if we go to some form of, if we choose the not the Brownfield Board option, I am fully intending to first survey the people who are on the Brownfield Board and ask if they have interest in serving on a land bank board, because that I think again, Ms. Barron's point about people having expertise, having done this work, being familiar with, I mean, it's not the same work, but it's clearly adjacent work, and so capturing some of those people's expertise and their experience is obviously going to be a valuable thing we'll want to pay. I want to pay real attention to if we're going to create another board. The other thing I'd like to say finally is I remain convinced that there's some value to smaller than, I believe the Brownfield Board is 11 people, but I also have heard my colleagues that 5 is maybe too small. It's a little tricky if we're going to be capturing a lot of skill sets on this board, a lot of community representation, to do that effectively with a very, very small board. So I think that smaller is better, but having had some discussions with former Mayor Bliss and some other people, at least a suggestion that I'd like the board to consider is perhaps a 7-member board, and those with the 7-member board, that would also allow us the space to say we could draft it so that essentially we could say that each ward could recommend a member for the board. So that would mean that the ward commissioners would have to get together and have a meeting of minds. So the first ward commissioners would have to agree on a recommendation, and so would the second ward commissioners, and so on. But that would give us perhaps some more robust input. But certainly, I think it would. I think there's some advantage to some breadth, but I also don't want a board that's so big that you start having people not attending. You have quorum problems or nimbleness. I mean, we've all been. One of the reasons I love working with all of you is because this is a group of 7. This is not a group of 138, which is what Lansing is, or 5,000, or however big Congress is. Like, there's a reason I think Congress isn't very effective. I think it's just too many people to be able to order a ham sandwich. So I think that smaller can be nimbler, more effective, more responsive, but too small can be, it can legitimately, I think, be hard to get representation, because this is a group that will want the whole community to really buy into if it's going to do transformational work. So I see a bunch of sort of intermediate hands. Commissioner Knight.
I think, thank you, Ms. Behrens, for this report. I would be in support of really keeping the Brownfield Real Development Authority board serving, and I understand the concept between having a smaller group more nimble, but you can also have no quorum with a smaller group. Like, that happens wherever. If people don't show up, they just don't show up. And I think being able to have the people that are already doing this work in this space, as we talked about the multiple tools that we need available for us as we move forward to create more housing, being that they're already working in that space, they have the ability to continue to move this forward and get the processes in place so that we can look further than maybe that's next year at adding this other board that may be of 7 people and them being able to onboard them with all the processes that are necessary to move forward with what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Commissioner Sassi.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, thanks, Ms. Behrens. That was a quick turnaround on this little memo that can try to consolidate all of our thinking. I also want to highlight that Mr. Doug Booth, who's been leading this work with our Economic Development Department, is in the audience, and he and I had the opportunity to be at the Brownfield Authority meeting following the initial discussion about where the brownfield was going to go, and I don't think anybody other than me from Brownfield was supposed to be on, is here today, but I think I would be fair to say that the Brownfield Authority is not set on, actually, they have, I don't want to say that they're like agnostic about it, but they recognize that they were doing this work because we were trying to go up against that clock to not be preempted. I think they're happy to keep on doing it, but they're also recognizing that, they're okay also if it goes outside of that. So I want to give that representation, which maybe wasn't as clear as the last time that we all met. What I'll also say is I appreciate the timeline, and I'm happy to hear, Mayor, that you would look at, and I would ask that we do have somebody who's serving right now who could be that continuity, because there has been a lot of work done. Obviously, there's new people. We've got new people. So there'll always be rotation of new people, but I think to give that would be great. I do see so much synergy as it relates that we just, probably some of you saw on the news, there's a emerging developer who had come to Brownfield and who got emerging developer grant and just, I think, secured one of the RAP programs that's going to happen in the first ward. So we know that there's synergies happening within our Economic Development Department, and I agree, I don't want to lose that. I said, last time I would like to have some of our voices in part of this. Again, it's not you as the mayor, it's just to have that, to know that housing is such a major concern for all of us, and people are looking for us to provide that, to want to have a voice of those who would be at the table. We're kind of going through that. Commissioner Kilgore is leading, just as we're looking at the Affordable Housing Fund, asking the question with Ms. Barron about what is missing on that body. So thank you for that update too, Commissioner, because I think sometimes we think about people who might have different skill sets, but it's really like what are the missing pieces? So there's financing in here, there's policy pieces, there's those that are connected in the community. I think probably initially we're probably going to need more of the financing and policy pieces, and then how do we work, because I think that's what's going to be needed first, and I feel like maybe we've even experienced that a little bit on the Affordable Housing Fund. That's a very large board. So I want to be fair and say that Brownfield Authority, again, they are not absolutely, we want to keep this. I would be supportive of moving to a separate body if we maintain that time frame to allow for the appropriate actions for the staff to occur. I guess I don't know how I feel about 5 versus 7. I think you right to point out this body is 7, and I think it's a good representation. Maybe 5 is a little too small. I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Knight, about the Brownfield Authority, because they have been doing the work, and they have done a lot of the heavy lift. And I also know, this body is hopefully trying to build some consensus to get to a really good policy piece. And so my sense was the last time we met that there were probably more of you who were supportive of a separate body. And so I think I'll just end my comments there and say those are the considerations from Brownfield. I'm happy to hear. I'd like commissioners to be able to put forth names and let my other colleagues weigh in. Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Robbins.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I too would be in support of having a separate body that is more small and nimble. I think I don't necessarily have an issue with the problem of 5 members, but I do think 7, to your point, does allow 2 extra people and with varying expertise to be able to chime in and make sure that what that body is doing is effective and well thought through. So I too would be in support of that. I also like the idea of offering up the option to current serving members on the Brownfield Authority to be able to serve if they want. But I think long term, when we talk about what we want this this land bank to do. I think we want it to be strategic in how it's operating and be able to think big and move fast. And so I think that, to me, seems like it's kind of the best of both worlds, where we're taking some of that expertise from people who are willing and want to serve on this separate body, but also giving it kind of some freedom and independence to kind of to run and develop and do its thing over time. So I would be in full support of that too.
Great. Commissioner Perdue.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you for the comments and sharing your perspectives and the perspective of the Brownfield Board. That's helpful. So what's on my mind, I think that I certainly support expanding the board for many of the reasons mentioned here. We want to be small and nimble. We can do that with 7. And there's so many key stakeholders and interest groups around this issue of housing, and certainly will be in the land bank specifically. And so I think just those 2 additional members will give us a lot more opportunity to do that. But I've said this since our first meeting, talking about even establishing the land bank, and then when we got the update, I think from Ms. Raniero a few months ago on how things were going, is we have to be extremely clear on our North Star and what are we strategically and intentionally trying to do here. And I think sometimes when we go too fast, we can lose sight of the initial purpose, and we might not all be on the same page of what truly is our vision and our intended outcomes. And so while Brownfield has been doing that foundational work, they had not yet gotten to that point during our last update. And I think it's important to really specify that and formalize that before handing it off potentially to a new board to then go and run, right? Because I hear a lot of emphasis on let's be small, let's be nimble, and let's move quick. But I think if we move too quick, we're going to look back 5-10 years from now and see how many opportunities we missed. And given that this will be the first land bank led by a city in the state of Michigan, outside of Detroit, folks will be looking at us as a roadmap, as a blueprint, as best practices, as what pitfalls to avoid. And so I don't want us to go too fast to trip over ourselves. And so I am totally in support of keeping it where it is until those items can be established. And then let's pass it off to a smaller, more nimble board to then rock and roll with it. There was an article that came out within the last week around home ownership rates in the city, and we have, particularly amongst Black Grand Rapidians, we have some of the lowest home ownership rates in the country, among the top 50 metro areas, and it's gotten worse. It's gotten worse over time. And so we continue to lead the nation in housing disparities. And so the land bank is a great opportunity for us to close those gaps, but we won't be successful in doing that if we move too fast, and we focus on being nimble and fast more than being intentional and outcome focused. So just to summarize, and I mentioned kind of that stat around Black home ownership, but we're talking about Grand Rapids as a whole as well in terms of disparities. And I think we all know our housing crisis and all the different subpopulations that are impacted by it. And so in those spirits, I am supportive of expanding the board to ensure that we have key stakeholders represented. And for now, I'd like to keep it where it is until the true North Star and intended outcomes and priority areas are clearly identified and codified. And then from there, I'll be super supportive of separating it so that it can run and fly and get things done. But I think we need to be really, really clear on what we're trying to accomplish. Thank you.
Commissioner Belichick, I haven't heard from you yet.
Thank you, colleagues, for all your perspectives, and I appreciate what you were thinking about there, Commissioner Perdue. So I'm just looking at this issue kind of like from a 30,000-foot view, and as a new voice, new member of the body here. And I'm not really, I guess one point of clarity I would like to see based on some of the things I'm hearing just now is if we kept it the way it was, at what point does it even necessarily have to come back to the commission, or is that something that the commission then has to pursue to ask for a change, whereas right now we are considering the change in this, what I would call the visionary stage of the body. So the land bank was set up last fall, and, had the core admin functions necessary to do that. And I really appreciate the work that body has done. And I do like the idea of preserving expertise and everything there. But right now, in front of us, as we're moving into this brand-new year that's already in we're ending our first quarter here this month, it seems to me that the vision of what we're doing next and that North Star should be determined in part by that body. And the land bank people who are on that body in coordination with staff and the commission, city commission, would be making that plan or that vision. So I guess I'm saying right now in front of us is the decision of who's going to be making that. Is it the current brownfield body, or is it this other group that would be solely focused on the land bank in conjunction with, the overlap it might have with other pieces? And so at that, I don't really care if it's 5 or 7, but I do think that the simplest choice in front of us is to just move forward with the members appointed by the mayor as it already exists in the bylaw, without having to move into another set of intergovernment agreement. But I wouldn't be opposed to that if that's what if we all felt that was necessary. I do appreciate the thought of having board recommendations, if nothing else. Those are my thoughts at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Behrens, you might want to jump in here, but I think if we're contemplating a shift of a board till July, not happening until July, that gives you plenty of time probably to go back and do that intergovernmental shift to go from 5 to 7. Is that a fair statement? Or?
Yes. I mean, if option 3 were what the commission wanted, we do anticipate that we'd be able to come to some sort of solution with the state. We could certainly support back if for some reason that's not as successful as we thought, but ample time to then bring forward the resolution and appoint the new members for them to take over in July.
It wouldn't delay you doing the work of getting a board, of getting us towards, like, thinking about how to transition and doing that kind of stuff, right? Obviously, we wouldn't do it until we had a new board to do stuff with, but some of the foundational work you could proceed on right now.
Right, we would, and to Commissioner Belchak and Commissioner Perdue's points about establishing policies, that would be the work of the board, whichever board it is that is in place, over the next 6 months or between now and July. I think what's reasonable for the current board is we were anticipating teeing up a property disposition policy, so based on the city's current policy, but then modified to fit the work of the local land bank. I think between now and July, it's less likely that we'd be able to just get through all of the considerations of the flip side of that, the property acquisition policy. I think that would be further down the road. And so then depending on the timeline that you want for the board would be made either by the current board or a future board. So I just wanted to lay that out there in terms of timing and considerations.
Great. Commissioner Kilgore, we're not voting on this, correct? So I think we kind of need the sense of the commission, and I've been doing sort of a straw poll consensus here. So if you could share your thoughts.
Sure. First, I'll start with what my colleague in the third ward, Commissioner Perdue, noted, and I have the letter from State Representative Christian Grant, who spearheaded these efforts in Lansing, who said we really need to be direct about what we want. I would echo what Commissioner Perdue said in terms of I'm happy that we're having the robust conversation. I've just been soaking it all in as well. I'm supportive of a 7-member body. I think that's good. I'm happy that we are going to have some direct commissioner feedback, and that Commissioner Perdue and I could work together to see what type of representation we'd like for our part of town. So I believe that's where I'm at. I think we've had some good conversations about this, and I think the timeline is that we've presented is okay for me for now on making this decision on a 7-person body or not.
Great. So I think what I heard was not consensus, but sort of majority sentiment towards option 3 there, with a contemplation of a 7-person board rather than a 5-person board, with recommendations from each ward for a member of that 7-person body. I think that's a fair summary of the majority opinion. Anybody think I read that wrong? Great. Then I think that's your direction, Ms. Behrens. So thank you so much for teeing that up and framing it, and excited to see this moving forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner.
Mr. Mayor, can we just make sure too, I see obviously members of Economic Development, we have our next Brownfield meeting, so last time we just had this as a other business, so maybe we can just have this as an agenda item just to keep that body up to date of what this discussion was.
On the you'd have the Brownfield
Yeah.
Board do that? Got it.
Just want to make sure they stay up to date. Thank you.
Got it. So, thank you.
And for clarity, transition in July is,
Yes, sounds, I think that's a consensus. Yep.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us on to our
Sorry,
next.
can you clarify that last piece?
Just that Ms. Barron's recommendation was that with the board not get, get transitioned until July at the earliest to allow for onboarding education of the new board, to allow for, input, all of, the time and effort it'll take to formulate the new board.
And did I also hear you say that creating that property disposition policy for the land bank properties will not likely be able to be done by July?
I think the disposition refinements we could likely do. I mean, Doug might be like behind me going, oh my goodness, but it is part of the early work we were talking about doing. The acquisition side of that, I don't think is likely to be adopted by that board by July. I think that would be down the road a little bit. And part of that is just to understand kind of, so acquiring property requires funding, and we have to figure out what's feasible, like how successful are we in disposing of the properties, what are we finding with the layering, and then what does that tell us about our ability and pace to be able to acquire properties. So I think that's a little bit down the road. And I know that's kind of vague. And also, I think that as part of the property disposition policy, we will start to be folding in the why. So our current city commission policy does have some tiered objectives of why or who gets priority for sales. And I imagine that the local land bank would likely be interested in that same focus. So you may start to see some of the North Star language in the disposition policy, even if it sort of changes or expands with an acquisition policy.
I just want to clarify though, that is acquisition beyond already focused tax foreclosed properties. You're talking about acquiring things that are not tax foreclosed, going beyond what we would normally be chartered to do. And I just want to also comment, I would hope I don't want this land bank to be like Detroit. We don't want the largest land bank in the country holding on to properties. We want land bank to help us address some of the tax foreclosures, some of the blighted areas, and quickly accelerate those properties back to the tax roll. And what we want is the market to work in our area when appropriate, and government not to hold all the land in the city. So I just wanted to be clear on the acquisition part. We're prepared, current and future board, to acquire tax foreclosed properties. What I think you were referring to was doing things beyond that.
Well, and if I could weigh in here, I think that really we're going to have an ongoing tension. We don't want to be doing kingdom building or, amassing a portfolio or something. I think you're absolutely right, City Manager. But there's going to be a tension between getting things back into good development possibilities as fast as possible with the reality that we really want to focus on affordable housing. If this doesn't help us get to the goal of affordability, I think that to Commissioner Perdue's point, we're going to, sit back in 5 years and say, well, that didn't help us get where we wanted to go. And so articulating where we want to go, I think where we want to go is two things. One is getting things back into private hands as fast as possible, but the other is doing things that will give us measurable progress towards affordable housing in the city. And so I think those two goals, but the third goal of having a bunch of land so we can feel like we own a bunch of land is not anything anybody's interested in. Right. Maybe that's a good summary. So Commissioner.
Right, and if I could add to just thinking about affordability, affordability comes in a lot of different forms, but I want to stress, and I think part of the North Star is homeowner affordability, right? My ultimate goal would not to be to have all of our nonprofit organizations own these properties, own and operate them. How do we get them back on the tax rolls and into the hands of individuals who live, work, and play in our community? So even defining that, what do we mean and what do we want when it comes to affordable housing with this vehicle, those are the things that, I want to see, and it sounds like will be clearly defined before the transition is made out of brownfield. So even kind of those small pieces are really, really key. This won't be a success for me if at the end of the day, all these properties are only owned and operated by nonprofits, and our residents are in and out like a revolving door. Folks need to own their property and have more ownership in their community themselves.
Thank you. And I will just, give a minor differentiation in my own opinion on this, which is home ownership's great, but there are lots of people in the community who rent for lots of reasons that are their own choices. And so I really want to have a community where I don't ever want to live in a community where implicitly or explicitly people who rent are second-class citizens. And I think that making sure we have affordable rental properties is really, really important. I think intuitively for a lot of people in community and people coming to the community, the first bedrock question is, how much does an X unit cost to rent in our community? And so I think keeping rental prices down is an objective we shouldn't abandon in favor of, home ownership as home ownership's our only goal. I think the two can exist in tandem, but I do think that making sure we have Grand Rapids as a good place to rent is also an important goal. Mr. Knight.
Just one more thing to add so we don't belabor the point, but I'd be interested in, I don't know if this information exists somewhere already, but of the number of properties that have been acquired, how many of them are actually buildable? Where do they exist? In what parts of the city? First ward, second ward, third ward, wherever that may be. And how many are just like for development, if they can be single-family dwellings, as opposed to just curious.
Sure, we have that information about the portfolio now.
Great. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, let's move on to our next briefing. And if Ms. Trickelson could come back up, and let's talk about the fun thing that's on everyone's mind now, which is the community master plan, and which is going to be a couple-year process to roll out from where we are now. But let's start with talking about the plan itself and where we are now.
All right, good morning again, Commission. So we wanted to provide you with an update on the progress we are making relative to the implementation of the Community Master Plan. And specifically, we want to provide a little bit more detail on one of those implementation strategies, which of course includes the update to the zoning ordinance. I am joined this morning by my colleague Rowan Brady, who's a planner with the Planning Department. Rowan will actually be leading some of what we're calling the Zoning Roadshow with the community, and so I thought it might be helpful. Okay. I thought it might be helpful for you to hear that from him. All right. Sorry, a lot of activity going on there. I don't know where to look.
I do have a question before we start,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor. We moved some things around, and I'm wondering, we have visitors from the food policy.
Yep.
So are they next?
They're next, I'm sorry.
We moved, we went from...
And I'm sorry I wasn't explicit enough about that,
Okay.
but I wanted to make sure that we had enough time to have the discussion and have the community master plan, and we'll do food, and then we will move on to I hope our long delayed, and our police chief and our fire chief are here. We have a community safety update, but that'll be after food. So
Okay, so we'll do community master plan now, then food policy.
Correct.
Just because I know these folks got
Right.
to get things to get back. Does that work? Okay.
Yeah, and we did communicate in advance, let them know that the commission would prioritize the things that they needed to give direction on today, and the other briefings are informational.
Okay. Thank you. So the agenda for our presentation is up on the screen, again, providing you with an overview of the implementation work that has been going on since the City Commission adopted the Community Master Plan back in December, and then walking you through some of our immediate next steps relative to the update of our city zoning ordinance. One of the strategies that we initially committed to was to provide an online plan, and so that is available on the city's website today, and it's effectively a more user-friendly way to walk through the community master plan. There are videos that were prepared in partnership with our steering committee members, kind of giving a better summary of what each chapter includes within the plan versus scrolling through a more detailed PDF version. And so we think that that will be really useful to both the community, but also any design professionals perhaps that might be utilizing the plan as they move forward with development applications. So that's something that I would encourage you to check out. One of the other elements that we are in the process of creating and should be done within the next couple of months is an online dashboard. So you may have heard me previously talk about one of the initial constructive feedback that we received on the 2002 plan was really, we really lacked some transparency relative to the implementation work that we had done. And so when we started with our neighborhood facilitators back in, I think it was the fall of 2019, asking them to help us review that the 2002 plan, what was working, what wasn't, one of the first questions we received was, well, what's been done? And you know, as planning staff, we were able to quickly articulate what we had done, but we realized that it wasn't a terribly transparent way to communicate the progress that the city had made. And I think that that was really critical because as we move forward and back to December of 2024, one of the number one comments that the City Commission received during the public hearing was accountability, making sure that the feedback and the time that our community members put into the development of the plan itself, that we were then held accountable through some sort of transparent way for the implementation of that work. And so the online dashboard will be a tool that the planning department will utilize, but also my colleagues in other departments will also be utilizing as they develop either their operational plan, the capital improvement plan, and the development of budgets, so that we can share with community and of course to the City Commission and Planning Commission where we are at relative to the implementation work. Now keep in mind this is a 20-year plan. There's a number of strategies that are aligned within short term, meaning 1 to 5 years, but there's also strategies that are going to take much more time and resources than we might have capacity to do currently. And so what you'll see is a report out, but not everything can be done immediately. All right, so I mentioned my colleagues in other departments. So one of the critical pieces that we've stressed is that the planning department is not the sole owner of the community master plan. We own a lot of it, and of course the zoning ordinance is probably one of the most tangible pieces of that plan. But there's a lot of other work that the city currently has or plans that are currently in place that will be informed by the recommendations of the strategic plan. And so we were able to go through during the Community Master Plan update and highlight all of the plans that we think are very relevant to the implementation of the Community Master Plan. So you can see on the left-hand side of the screen a list. This is probably not all-encompassing, but I think that these are some of the major plans that the city has in place, but also some of our partners. So for example, the Rapid just completed their transit plan, and that was informed and will continue to be informed by the recommendations of the Community Master Plan. So I will give credit to Rowan for the next couple of slides as we move through to show how that alignment is going to work, and hopefully you'll appreciate the animation here. So as we go chapter by chapter, of course, the Great Neighborhoods chapter is providing the recommendations about our neighborhoods and how we can meet needs of residents. So there are 10 recommendations of the 28 that are encompassed within or included within the Great Neighborhoods that are specific to zoning, and we'll be talking more about that as we move through the coming months here. But there's 18 recommendations that are largely attributed to other plans that the city already has, and it's not necessarily a one-for-one, and so you'll see the dots as they move forward. Ta-da, to show that those 18 other recommendations fold very nicely into plans such as the Vital Streets, the Climate Adaptation Action Plan, and then also, of course, our area-specific plans. And so there are a lot of other plans that will move those recommendations forward. Vital business districts as well how we will provide a variety of products and services and attract people of all ages, 7 recommendations of that chapter will be included within the zoning ordinance update. And then there's 4 recommendations that are going to be, will utilize other plans that we have in place. And you can see how that breaks out. And again, very clearly, if we go back and forth here, I mentioned that there's 4 recommendations that align with the other planning work. And then as the dots move towards the left side of the screen, you can see that it's not a one-for-one, that a lot of other plans that we currently have in process are going to have to be utilized as the vehicle to implement that work. Strong economy, this is largely focused on some of our larger manufacturers, our larger employers. 6 of those recommendations are specific to the zoning ordinance. One of the recommendations that we heard pretty consistently was about greater flexibility within the zoning ordinance. How do we make sure that we're addressing the needs of today, but also being flexible for addressing the needs of tomorrow? And so that really resonated with me as to how do we do that so we don't stumble upon ourselves as we try to achieve the outcomes that were desired by our community. And then 4 of the recommendations are really housed in the other plans. Again, Vital Streets is a pretty consistent plan that will be informed by the recommendations of the Community Master Plan, as well as the Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan as well. Balanced mobility, that was one of the critical components of this community master plan. We heard very clearly that mobility options were well desired by our community and how they move throughout the city. 9 recommendations will be encompassed within the zoning ordinance update. Of course, my colleagues in Mobile GR will help flesh that out. And then 8 of the recommendations will be moved forward through the other planning work. And you can see the sheer number of dots and how many plans will be informed by the recommendations of the balanced mobility chapter. And then desirable development character, that's a little bit more difficult to succinctly articulate what that chapter is, but it really brought together all of the chapters and really works to help, or will help us, guide the development character that takes place within the city. And when I talk about character, I'm really talking about the built environment, about buildings and their placement, how they function, site circulation, etc. And so those recommendations are almost all going to be within the zoning ordinance update. Very few other plans, I believe, will be informed by that chapter specifically, but there are certainly, of course, some that will take place. Oops, I'm sorry, did you want me to go back there, Commissioner?
I got it.
You got it? Okay, great. So that's where we are to date. And again, colleagues in other departments will be utilizing this plan as they move forward with their goals and their work plans through the various departments. Going back to the zoning ordinance piece, that will be one of our next major projects, of course, that I think most of you are familiar with the why. But I think it's important that we do bring the community along. One of the things that we want to be very clear about is understanding the difference between what is a community master plan and what is a zoning ordinance. Probably many of us in this room might be familiar how the community master plan sets that long range vision, that big picture, but the zoning ordinance really gets down kind of into the nitty gritty. It will tell you how tall can your house be, how many accessory structures might you have, what building materials and businesses, what building materials can be used, what businesses can go where. And so it's a very, it's a bit more of a difficult conversation than that level of specificity. And so it's really important, we think, that we bring the community through those conversations and understand and have the educational piece before we actually try to have the conversation about taking our community master plan into the zoning ordinance. So we want to kind of try to level set as we move forward. And I think it's important to understand, why do we plan? Why do we zone? How does that work? And there are enabling legislations that give the City of Grand Rapids specific authority to plan for itself and to zone for itself. We have, our plan is called our Bridge to Our Future, our Community Master Plan. And of course, I've just talked about that. We also have very specific plans that I think there's 11 in the city that exist that get down into a more parcel by parcel basis, very specific to the needs and wants of an individual neighborhood or an individual business association or district, for example. And ultimately, those three components are going to lead to the zoning ordinance. So there are some limitations, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, some constraints of zoning that maybe we wish weren't there or that are that could go further. But the zoning ordinance is going to is that legal document. So oftentimes we hear, well, the community master plan says this, but the legal authority in the law of the land, if you will, relative to land use, I mean, is embedded within the zoning ordinance. And so that's the document that we use, or the tool that we use to implement those recommendations. And of course, before we go too far, I think it's going to be a natural question if we're talking about updating our zoning ordinance again, that many community members might ask, well, what happened with the most recent round of zoning amendments? And so we wanted to make sure that we thought about that as we move forward. So here is the slide dedicated to that. We had goals as part of the housing amendments that were adopted back in May of 2024. We wanted to increase housing supplies, diversify the housing types, and increase housing affordability. There were some additional outcomes. We were able to reduce overall review and approval times. Fees were reduced as a result of a different review process that would take place. And what we are finding is that our relationships with small local developers, small housing developers, has improved significantly. They've been very communicative with us about what their projects are and how they're being impacted by the current zoning, but also, fortunately, by some of the amendments. And you can see we're able to get a quote from one of our local housing providers allowing projects to move forward that may not have been able to move forward under the previous ordinance. These zoning amendments were targeted, specific to duplexes, some small-scale multifamily housing that we defined as 6 or less units, and then accessory dwelling units. To date, so since May of 2024, we've had 10 new duplexes that have come forward and have been permitted as a result. There are more, but these are the 10 structures that are located on these specific street types that were mentioned that are embedded within the amendment. So that's 20 new dwelling units specifically within a duplex that were able to move forward that wouldn't have been able to move forward likely, at least not without a very a larger, more robust, expensive process, whether that went through the Planning Commission or the Board of Zoning Appeals. We've had 3 new structures totaling 11 units that are included within a small-scale housing development, again defined as 6 or less units. So right there's 31 new housing units since May of 2024. In zoning world, that's pretty helpful. You know, typically we think about zoning as kind of it takes a while to see the fruits of our labor sometimes, and so I think that we should be proud that we were able to see this number of units come forward. And then because I know accessory dwelling units is a hot topic within our community generally, we wanted to highlight the significant progress that we were able to make here. Since 2008, we only had 9 accessory dwelling units that were able to move forward. Since these amendments were adopted, we had 8 additional units, so 8 in less than a year, whereas 9 for the length of time that is, that I can't do quick math there, or over a decade prior to these amendments. And so that's something that we're continuing to refine as we move forward here. So here's the schedule that we have put together based on what we think is a reasonable engagement strategy as we move forward, updating the zoning ordinance, but also aligning with our budget. So we're currently in what we would call phase 1, providing this briefing today, working on the formation of a technical advisory committee, issuing a request for proposal to provide consulting services to support the planning department. We want to survey our design professionals to get a better idea about what sections of the current ordinance are working, what might frustrate them, where do they think we could do better on, et cetera. And then the roadshow that I mentioned, going out into the community to talk about zoning and specifically some of the next steps for the zoning ordinance process. We'd move into phase 2, which is maybe the more public-facing amendment process that's specific to the implementation of the community master plan, writing the ordinance, testing it with the community. We heard this. Here's how we think we can amend the ordinance to implement that. What do we think? So one example that I like to bring forward is we heard a desire for greater flexibility around non-residential uses in residential zone districts. Loud and clear that came through with the community master plan. So now the question is, what does that mean? Is it everywhere in the neighborhood? Is it on certain street types? How big should that non-residential use be? Is it 5,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet? So those are some of the next steps or questions that we'll be asking within the phase 2. And then, of course, throughout that process, we'll be providing periodic updates where it makes sense with both the Planning Commission and the City Commission, much like we did through the Community Master Plan process. And then the goal, of course, is to adopt by the spring of 2027. Certainly, this is just a tentative timeline. We'll flesh that out further as we move forward with our consultant work. So I wanted to break out phase 2 because I think it's important to know, especially as we talk about what that engagement would look like. I mentioned that we would be working in partnership with a consultant. The writing of that language would likely be primarily taken on by both the planning consultant and city staff initially. We'd be working with a technical advisory committee that would be subject matter experts to advise us on language, the practical reality of that. Sometimes there's important lessons to learn from design professionals that planners might not otherwise know. So we want to make sure that that's a real partnership, that whatever we move forward with is practical and implementable. And then, of course, we'd want to review that or refine that language before it goes out into the community. So that would be that third step, is that community testing, so that we have draft language that's prepared that community can react to. We know, or we believe, that it's important to have user groups. So, for example, I think some of our neighborhood associations have really strong land use committees. So working with some of those committees, working with our area realtors to begin socializing that language and getting feedback, providing some larger format, public review, town hall style, but also going out to individual associations and share neighborhood associations or business associations and sharing that the draft language is all part of that process. I mentioned that the request for proposal would be issued hopefully early summer, late spring. I mentioned the user survey, that we want to get feedback from design professionals that engage with our services, that utilize the City of Grand Rapids zoning ordinance specifically to get a better understanding of what's working and what's not. And then taking this out on the road, we want to provide an overview of the plan. We are not redoing the master plan. We are not asking for feedback on the recommendations, so we want to be very clear. And then we want to be very clear on that relationship moving it to the zoning ordinance. So these are some of the associations that we think would be helpful as we, to touch base with as we move through that roadshow process. So I'm going to turn it over quickly to Rowan to go through the next few slides so that you're able to see the kind of content that we would be utilizing, but also with some of the new commissioners, especially making sure that we're being helpful in understanding the zoning ordinance itself.
Thank you, Director Turkelson, and good morning, Commission. We wanted, as Planning Director Turkelson mentioned, we're just going to do a quick introduction for the wondrous world of zoning. If you're familiar with zoning, this will just be a quick refresher on how it works and how it's structured in Grand Rapids. So what is zoning at a high level? Zoning is the local law that governs the physical development of land and use of property. Every property in a zoned community like Grand Rapids has a legal zoning designation, and that designation is outlined in further detail in a document called the zoning ordinance. Planners will often just call it the ordinance. If you're speaking with someone from the planning department and we say the ordinance, we're talking about the zoning ordinance. Zoning varies from state to state. I mention that because every community across the United States, based on that state's enabling legislation, will have different zoning laws. For example, Texas famously has several communities that don't have any zoning. Mr. Washington, I'll defer to you on if that's a wise decision or not for those communities in Texas. But in the state of Michigan, we're governed by the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. There are numerous benefits of zoning. Zoning provides local control relevant to land use. You, as the local elected officials of the City of Grand Rapids, have the authority to adopt and change zoning ordinances. Zoning protects the health, safety, and general welfare of that community. That specific language of health, safety, and general welfare comes from the first Supreme Court decision that established zoning as a constitutional tool for local governments to use. Getting a little bit more into the detail on zoning, it helps protect property values, creates unique public spaces, protects our natural resources like streams, creeks, trees, natural areas, prevents nuisances from high nuisance generating activity like heavy industry, and then helps ensure that our pattern and orientation of land uses works together well and is compatible with two different land uses. You know, having a residential neighborhood next to a heavy industry isn't a compatible relationship, but residential to parks is a very compatible relationship. Zoning has constraints, certainly. It's not a perfect tool and it's not a perfect system. It can add complexity to the development process. For someone who's doing a project for the first time, it can be like a large endeavor to read through an ordinance or understand what's allowed and where and what are the regulations around land development. It can be slow to adapt to unique situations. It's impossible to anticipate every single project or every single idea that someone can dream up of, and our zoning ordinances are local laws and those take time to change. And so when someone comes to us with a unique idea, we have to evaluate it and then make those recommendations for changes, and that unfortunately takes time. When zoning was developed in the early 1900s, it was inherently a tool for preservation to keep what we have. One of my professors in school always said that zoning is playing from a defensive position. I don't necessarily understand the sports reference, but I think I get the sentiment that zoning over its history has been in order to preserve and keep what the community is today. Only recently have zoning ordinances changed to be a little bit more adaptable and a little bit more permissive in relationship to land use and development. There are unintended consequences as any policy or any law, and it's hard to understand what those may be. I'll dive into that in a little bit more detail, but there are strategies to help mitigate some of those unintended consequences. Zoning is also land-based. It's not operator-based. Zoning cannot show deference to one specific business or individual. It's only about the land and how it's being used. Zoning is limited in what it can and cannot do. There are other state and federal laws that limit zoning's authority, and we have a century of court cases from all levels, from local courts all the way up to the Supreme Court, that have dictated what zoning can and cannot do. In Michigan, there are several laws that were adopted by the state legislatures, such as the Rent Control Act, that limit our ability as a local unit of government to influence things like rent prices and rent increases, and inclusionary zoning, meaning requiring a certain portion of a project to have an affordable housing component. Other communities across the United States are in states that don't have those regulations, and so it's a little bit unique to state on how zoning functions and how zoning works. And we're always here to answer questions. If you have ideas that you've seen in other communities, we can provide a little bit of guidance. But, you know, you'll see stories specifically from the Pacific Northwest of Washington and Oregon that are doing very progressive ideas with inclusionary affordability mandates, and unfortunately, that's not a tool available to us in Michigan. Zoning can also not regulate or prioritize ownership. That gets back to the land base, the not operator base, and you cannot prohibit certain uses outright citywide. It's called exclusionary zoning, and that's illegal. If there's a use that's a demonstrated need in the community, you are required to allow it somewhere within the community in a zone district somewhere. The image on the right shows some different zone districts. I've just colored them based on the zone district. This is the intersection of Wealthy and Jefferson. So you can see how zoning functions at kind of a larger district perspective. This is unique. There's quite a bit of districts in this small geography. It just happenstance that we picked this intersection, and there were all of this wonderful things to show you. But it's very much a district-based, talking about larger patterns of land use. Looking at Grand Rapids specifically, zoning in Grand Rapids has two components, the neighborhood classification and the district. If you were to call the planning department and ask what zoning district your house is in, you would get these two pieces of information. You would get the neighborhood classification and then the district. The neighborhood classification outlines design standards for structures and development, so things like porches, garage placement, how many windows do you need on a house, what percentage of a commercial building needs to be glass, how large can a building be, what does it need to be made out of, what are the material requirements, what size lot do you need to develop a single family home or a duplex or even getting up to a larger multifamily development, and then what is the residential density, how many units can you fit on a property based on the size. Switching over to the district outlines what uses are allowed. There are broadly kind of three categories of uses. There are uses that are permitted by right, meaning that you can go do it today, provided you get all the necessary permits. And then special land uses. These are uses that require approval from the Planning Commission. And then there are uses that are not permitted, meaning they're not allowed in the zone districts. You can think of these as three different levels of intensity. Uses that have no or minimal impact on surrounding properties are typically uses that are permitted by right. Uses that have potential to have moderate or high impact on surrounding properties are those that are special uses and require that review by the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission is the body that determines if it's appropriate at that location, if there are any additional conditions that need to be stated to ensure that the use aligns with the zone district and our broader land use goals. And then the uses that have a substantial impact or a burdensome impact usually are not permitted. Getting a little bit deeper into both of these kind of two categories, we have three neighborhood classifications: the traditional neighborhood, the mid-20th century neighborhood, and the modern era neighborhood. The traditional neighborhood are the oldest parts of the city with a large range of housing types and dense residential development. The mid-20th century neighborhoods, as the name suggests, were built from the early 20th to the late 20th century and are typically single-family homes on larger lots compared to the traditional neighborhood. And then the modern neighborhood is the newest residential development in the city. These are typically suburban-style developments with almost exclusively single-family homes and large lots. If you were to look at a map of Grand Rapids and see where these neighborhood classifications are, just based on geography, it would look like a series of rings, where the core part of the city that was developed first, just from a temporal perspective, is the traditional neighborhood. The second ring would be the mid-20th century neighborhoods, and then the final ring would be the modern era neighborhoods. We have 19 specific zone districts in the city of Grand Rapids. I haven't listed them all out for you because that would take up too much space, but they're broadly categorized into these four buckets. There are the residential zone districts. We have the low density and the mixed density residential, and then there are the commercial mixed use zone districts. These range from our city center zone district to our commercial zone district, which is 28th Street and every commercial district in between. And then there are special districts. These are very specific to a type of place or a specific industry. So our industrial areas, our institutional campuses, which are our colleges and hospitals, the open space district, which is all of our parks and open spaces, the airport, and don't need to explain that one, and then the planned redevelopment district. So these are for large planned campuses like Celebration North, where development happened in a quick period of time under a coordinated plan. And then finally, there are overlay districts. These are special areas that have unique zoning requirements based beyond the base zone district. You can think of them as blankets. They lay on top of other zone districts and add additional requirements. One example is our Grand River overlay that Planning Director Turkelson talked about a little bit earlier today. That applies to all properties that front the Grand River, and that those requirements regarding building design and form overlay on top of the base zone district requirement. Looking at a property level, what does zoning look like if you were to look at a property? It's kind of just a high-level outline of things we work through in the planning department and what developers are thinking about when they look at property. So zoning touches on property use. What is the property? Is it an apartment building? Is it retail? What are the lot dimensions? What is the lot size and width? And what are required for different uses? setbacks. What are the distances from the property lines? Those tend to change based on use and zone district. The required building line, where does the building need to be placed relative to the street? What site elements need to be included? Green space, tree canopy, landscaping, and then everyone's favorite topic, parking. How much parking needs to be provided and where? What's not shown in this graphic are the building elements. Zoning also touches on how tall a building can be, either in stories or feet. Facade requirements, so what does it look like if you're standing on the sidewalk? What is the building built out of? We require high quality and durable materials. How much of the building needs to be transparent, made out of windows or glass? And then some architectural elements like entrance placement, step backs, meaning the building steps back from the street as it goes higher, and then other architectural features of the building. All of that is outlined in the zoning ordinance. Do you want me to do this slide too? Yeah, okay. So kind of looking at where we are today versus where we're going. So today, we have fairly a limited amount of developable land in Grand Rapids. We have a saying in the planning department that if there's a vacant piece of property in Grand Rapids, there's probably a reason, meaning that it is a challenging piece to develop, and we work through those challenges certainly. And as we're talking about housing and all of the other challenges that the city and residents face, doing nothing today comes with a high cost tomorrow. And so as we look to transition to the vision set in the Bridge to Our Future master plan through updating the zoning ordinance and also all of the other alignment that Planning Director Turkelson talked about earlier in the presentation, there are going to be growing pains, certainly. The city is not going to be the same today as it will 10 years in the future. And it's important to understand the potential impacts of those changes. Getting to the vision of the community master plan will not be achieved by staying the course, and it is important for us to manage growth and change as the city evolves over time. I have an example down at the bottom of the slide what a implementation from a recommendation to an ordinance update would be. So I pulled out recommendation 2A4 from the community master plan, support taller commercial buildings in commercial districts. So when we evaluate what does that mean, one potential option is to increase minimum and maximum building heights in those commercial districts. That has a potential impact. That would increase the street presence and the visual impact on adjacent properties. Living or working next to a 2-story building feels different than living or working next to a 4-story building. And so how can we mitigate that potential impact to those adjacent properties? And that could be achieved by requiring additional architectural elements, like those step backs that I mentioned, or other features. And so as we go through this process, it'll be a balance of implementing the recommendations, identifying those impacts, and then finding mitigating solutions to those impacts. I will turn it back to the Planning Director. Yeah.
Thank you, Rowan. So that should give City Commission and community kind of an overview of the types of conversations that we'll be having as we move through this first phase that we're calling the roadshow. I think I've touched a lot of these points already in my timeline. So with that, I will turn it back over to the City Commission for questions or comments.
Thanks. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Belcheck.
Thank you, everyone, for your hard work on this. I know this is a lion's share of our work going forward. And thank you, Rowan, for the great tutorial. I really hope that people go back and watch that, or we share it. So on these things, as we think towards our larger vision, I am wondering, in this tutorial, so to speak, when you look at site elements such as green space, canopy, and things like that, and then you also look at like building elements, where does our rules or considerations of green building, solar, et cetera, as well as the carbon footprint of our building, where does that fit into this package?
Yep, So there are some site elements that, Rowan, I think, did at a high level, talked about green space and some site elements, but certainly green infrastructure is part of that stormwater management. But that's where we look to some of the other plans that are in place. So zoning, for example, wouldn't regulate the carbon footprint of a building. But with the community action plan that sustainability is working on, that's where some additional tools are brought forward to address the larger comments or concerns that the community has. So it's a bit of a marriage of plans that advance some of these issues.
So when the Planning Commission is considering things, what tools do they have to be able to encourage developers or check boxes, so to speak, as they go through their line of questioning that we can give them?
Yep. So in most cases, I think the recommendation would be to simply require it. So if there are expectations that X amount of green space be included or not be included on a property to manage stormwater, or X number of trees, for example, to absorb some of that water, those are all just requirements that are built within the zoning ordinance. You can incentivize. We've had varying degrees of success around bonuses or incentives. So for example, you could require additional amounts of green infrastructure you can incentivize additional amounts of green infrastructure in lieu or in exchange, you can get additional density allowances in the building. So there's some carrot and stick kind of conversations that can also be embedded. And those are all tools that the Planning Commission can use.
And I'm glad you brought up density, because that was my other question. And particularly when we're thinking about helping our community, we've done the planning in the vision of what our new city in the next 20 years could develop like. But what would you say to people who would be, I don't want my neighborhood to change, even though we are expecting change? What would, and density being a particular one, and height restrictions and things like that start to fall into that?
I think this slide adequately covers that there are simply trade-offs that have to be considered, and there's needs and goals of the community, but then there has to be an understanding that there will be growing pains to achieve those needs and wants, and we mitigate them to the extent possible. And like Rowan just said, doing nothing comes with a cost as well, and if we do nothing, we can't reasonably expect the vision to be achieved.
Thank you.
Commissioner Isasi.
Thank you. Thank you both for the presentation, and it's a reminder. I think last year you got the best presentation of the year award from me. And this one, I think, is right up there with the showing of the different plans. I mean, quite honestly, I think that can be very confusing as you're talking with individuals, and, some are more recent than others, but I think that consideration was very helpful to look through. And then, we just had that when we had the piece of property on market, the last commission meeting with the option. And, I think there were some individuals who felt like, well, what about this consideration? And then we have to weigh it with these other considerations, right? And what it looks like overall. So I think in that piece, I don't know if that's really an answer to what you just asked, Commissioner, but is how we try to make those decisions. It's not, this is absolutely the answer, but these are the guiding principles, and these are the pieces and changing elements. So I really appreciate all of that. I think that's really helpful. I know when Commissioner Knight, we just met with some of our second ward neighborhood associations and talking about the number of events that they put forth and put on. I didn't see it specifically listed, which doesn't mean that you're not going to consider them, but I would also say our corridor improvement authorities in association with our neighborhood associations. I think some of them are more connected to their business associations, connected to their neighborhood associations, and some are not, is kind of what we're seeing. And so just wanting to make sure that they have that opportunity to weigh in as well. So thank you.
Yep, absolutely. They were sort of lumped together with neighborhood, business, corridor improvements, but yes, they are on the list.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, thank you so much for the briefing. And this brings us to the food systems. And Ms. Bohach is coming up for this, I believe.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All set? Okay. You're so quiet. So early last year, Ms. Wendy Randall and Ms. Janelle Vandergrift were here giving you information and update on the Kent County Essential Needs Task Force and the work of the Kent County Food Policy Council. And at that time, Ms. Vandergrift provided information about a food assessment that had occurred and then efforts that were underway to actually create a food system plan. So they are back today to give you an update on that, the final plan, let you know about the goals and priorities of that plan and how folks can get engaged in terms of how that will be implemented in our community. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Wendy Randall, who is the Executive Director of the Kent County Essential Needs Task Force.
Good morning. Thank you for having us here today. I'm going to also introduce Janelle Vandergrift, who is the Partnerships Manager for the Kent County Food Policy Council, and she's going to kick off our presentation today.
Yes, thank you for having us on such a busy morning. I know there's lots that you're working on today, so great to have your listening ears. So the Kent County Food Policy Council exists to strengthen and grow a local good food system in Kent County and the city of Grand Rapids. And I just decided to put your mission statement, the city of Grand Rapids mission statement here to demonstrate the direct connection between our food system and quality of life. So as Connie mentioned, I was here in the fall of 2023. I promised I'd come back, and here I am with Wendy. And the food system plan is complete. It's a 46-page document, which you have in front of you. There's some overviews in the entrance if anyone wants to take a look at that from the public. And then you can also access it from the QR code here. So what is a food system? The term local food system refers to growing, harvesting, gathering, selling, buying, processing, preparing, and eating food, as well as food waste in our community. And the Michigan Good Food Charter has defined a good food system as accessible, healthy, equitable, diverse, fair, and sustainable. So the process to create this plan was collaborative from beginning to now, and I just want to point out a couple of partners that we have in the room. We have someone from Public Agency, which is part of WMCAT, who helped us with the community engagement of the plan, as well as New Venture Advisors. We have someone here from New Venture Advisors, which is a consulting firm that does this work nationally, and they helped us create this food system plan and the food system assessment I presented a couple years ago. So just wanted to also extend that invitation to collaboration moving forward for this body. Thank you. For this body, as well as for members of the public as well, to work with us as we work towards adoption of the plan that we will be presenting today.
So you may be wondering, what is a food system plan? So like transportation and housing, food is another vital system that communities need to thrive. A food system plan provides a long-range plan, such as a 10-year plan or extended, that outlines goals or priorities and the actions to achieve them. Actions include strengthening and building upon existing policies, programs, and investment of the community's food system, as well as identifying new and innovative ones. This plan has sought alignment with other local plans, such as your City of Grand Rapids Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. Why does Kent County need a food system plan? Well, through extensive community engagement and the completion of our community food system assessment, several challenges across the food system have been identified. Some key challenge areas include nearly half of farmland lost in the past 70 years due to development. Dependency on migrant labor, making the economic sector vulnerable to federal policy shifts. 10% of residents are food insecure despite over 220 food programs in the area. And food waste is a high contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and therefore is an opportunity to glean and recover food to help address the food insecurity challenge. Similar to other communities across the country, the Kent County Food Policy Council and partners saw the need to identify community priorities and make a plan. As a multi-year effort starting in fall of 2022, we have invested time and resources to develop this 10-year plan with the support of the Michigan Health Endowment Fund and engagement of dozens of partners and community members. As this multi-year effort unfolded, it entailed the conducting of a food system assessment, so looking at all sectors of the food system, conducting a policy scan of existing local plans and policies to understand potential alignment, including city policies and county policies, engaging community throughout the process to understand challenges and identify priorities. And part of this engagement included over 2,800 responses on food system priorities in the community health needs assessment that was conducted by the Kent County Health Department.
So this is always a risk. I'm going to try to show you a 1-minute video just overviewing the process. So it's what's going to happen when I press play. Oh yeah, of course, no sound. Let's try again.
Go back, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
The Kent County Food Policy Council formed in 2021 to advocate for and promote a good food system. We eat every day, and how we get our food matters. So, we asked our community to help us build a food system plan for Kent County, and here are the 5 big picture goals. Access to healthy food for all, investment in a thriving local food economy, reduction of our food waste, protection of our soil, water, and land, better coordination and education around food. Dig deeper into how we make this happen by visiting our website. Join us in creating a food system that everyone in Kent County can savor today and for generations to come. The Kent County Food Policy Council.
Okay, we don't need to see it again. So the video gives you a sense of what we heard in our community engagement process, and the goals are listed in order of how much we heard from our community about each of those issues. So 5 overall goals, 17 objectives, and 75 actions. And there were 3 cross-cutting topics: climate action, urban agriculture, farm to school, which have actions from each of the 5 goals within them, and you'll see that within the plan towards the end. So because we have 10 minutes, we are not going to go through all the actions of the plan today, but we're going to go through each goal and just talk about an objective and a few of the actions within it, and would welcome an opportunity to speak further in the future if there's a specific goal or something that you'd like to discuss. So goal 1 is ensuring access to healthy food for all. So objective 2 is investing in programs that address the affordability of healthy foods. This would include enhancing food as medicine programs, building awareness and advocate for increased funding of Double Up food bucks and programs that provide SNAP matching dollars, as well as incentivizing alternative grocery models like our own community food club. Goal 2 is investing in a thriving local food economy. So objective 1 here is supporting agriculture producers to increase the supply of locally grown foods. Actions include increasing access to land and reducing barriers for producers, especially for socially disadvantaged farmers and new beginning farmers, as well as inventorying city and county-owned properties to identify any suitable land for agricultural use and making this land available at a discounted rate. And then goal 3 is reducing food waste and related solid wastes. So that would be adopting public procurement policies that facilitate solid waste reduction, as well as establishing food waste processes and corresponding resources for food at public facilities and events, and advocating for state policies that regulate or prohibit food waste in landfills.
Under Goal 4, which is to protect and regenerate our soil, water, and land, one of our key objectives is to align with the City of Grand Rapids sustainability goals and climate action and adaptation plan. There was regular dialogue between the Food Policy Council and the CAP committee throughout the planning processes. We know that food systems was a top priority in their community engagement as well as ours. Among the tasks, we have Action 3.2, which is establish environmental preferred purchasing policies in local government and institutions to prioritize products that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And point 3.3, implement actions to reduce food waste, which also overlaps with Goal 3, specifically on food waste. Goal 5 then is strengthen food system coordination and education. Throughout our community engagement process, we heard about the need to strengthen food system coordination and education. The Kent County Food Policy Council was born in 2021 to help make that happen, and the food system plan sets up objectives to further coordinate the many partners and sectors that make up this work. The plan suggests a city representative join as a non-voting member of the council to better integrate Kent County Food System Plan into existing city planning efforts.
So the Kent County Food Policy Council is committed to move this plan forward through partnership engagement, coordination of action items, progress assessment, and community engagement. And I won't get into these priorities, but our Food Policy Council has spent time identifying our first places to start in these 75 actions and within each goal area. For those in the public and our community that want to get involved, as well as for commissioners, we would look forward to working further with you. Please check out our website, contact us, come to one of our public meetings, and we look forward to working further with you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Comments, commissioners? Commissioner Kilgore.
Thanks. Well, thank you all so much for your presentation. I've had the opportunity to see more of you all's work through a million different avenues, which is really positive, such as the neighborhood, what is that? Not the neighborhood associations, but
The Neighborhood Summit?
The summit, yeah, and that was really nice to see that presentation, and there was such excitement that got us to the plan that we have in front of us today. So I'm really happy that there's community buy-in, that folks are excited about this. I just want to highlight that I believe that might have been even our last city commission meeting. I've really been trying to champion number 3, which is composting food waste, because once again, as you all have noticed, there is some really good synergy and plans and ideas that we already have labeled as goals for the city, right? We want to reduce carbon. We have this big goal. I believe that that is something that we need to look more into. We're having conversations about single hauler. So those are conversations I want to continue to champion, and I like things where there's synergy. We've already committed to it. There's talks with the county, right, of if the county will do that, but I am hoping that we can find a way that the city can champion that. So just want to let you all know those are conversations that we're having, and I think that this is one of those uniting issues, especially in today's divisive times. I think everyone is really excited to see how we can help feed our families and make this community better. So thank you. I was really looking forward to this presentation today.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Perdue.
Thank you both so much. Thanks for coming back and staying true to that word. So I want to just connect this to a conversation we had earlier. I'm looking for the Director of Planning. Go ahead, see her in the back. I'm just wondering, because there are some pieces in here, particularly around action items that are programmatic in nature, policy. Their policies, their practices, but there's also some connections to zoning. And just thinking earlier about the presentation we had on zoning implementation and tracking and kind of the alignment with different plans. I'm wondering if there's an interest and appetite to kind of crosswalk some of the goals here with what the city is doing, particularly in the area of zoning, and how might we integrate some of these goals and action items into our work. So that's more of a question, I think, for city manager and his leadership to think about how we can utilize this tool. Because you're right, food systems are key, and particularly as we think about the impacts of climate change, international conflict, disrupted trade, I do wonder and worry about what the worst case scenario might be for us locally, and just how do we improve things as is if none of those catastrophes happen, but also if things get worse, how might we make sure that we have enough food and local food supplies to sustain our city. and just, again, long-term kind of systems improvement. So, yeah, just would love to hear your thinking on that, City Manager, either now or at a later time.
So if I can jump in here a little bit, I think I'm the only person up here who actually has been a farmer. You owned a farm?
Well, I was just going to say, if I had a chance to add some, that I've worked with farms. I did environmental pollution prevention with the Kent and Ottawa County Conservation Districts and the farms. So I've been on a lot of farms. Appreciate the thought process here to supporting new farmers. Like there's a lot of interest in co-ops and things like that. And actually, back in the 90s and early 2000s, I was on the Greater Grand Rapids Food System Council before that disappeared. So this idea of farm to table, farm to school, I think of Kids Food Basket, I think of other things, and I think of like how many places in our community people are trying to do community gardens for that food sufficiency, and the Other Way Ministries I know has done some stuff. And so again, back to the zoning conversation, like the idea that we can have urban agriculture on top of developing, I think that this is, again, where we need to think really far future and not like bring the future here now, because there's a lot of opportunity in unusual places to grow food. That could be in people's backyards, it could be up vertical infrastructure, it could be on rooftops, it could be in a lot of different places. But farming is not an easy business to get into. So I'll tee you up for that. How's that, Mayor?
Yeah. So having actually been a farmer, thanks for this presentation. I guess my overall, 2 cents of feedback for you is a lot of this seems to be focused on monetize and economic activity. And one of the things that I always carry around with me is that basically at the end of World War II, 40% of the vegetables consumed inside cities were grown inside cities. And so I had to look pretty hard to find any reference here to anything that wasn't really monetized. It does say in Objective 3 under Goal 1, there's some reference to gardening, but I think that probably our lowest hanging fruit in the city, so to speak, is intensive gardening. And I think that that, of course, no money changes hands. You're not supporting a business. People are growing food and putting it on their table. And so you don't have to process it. You don't have to think about where you need to get it processed. You don't have to build a farmer's market for a tomato in your backyard. And so I would urge you to think about the non-monetized. I mean, the simplest system is one that doesn't exist. I don't need a food system to get me a tomato from my front yard into my house. I just need tomato seeds. And demonstrably, that's been possible in cities that look like ours in the past. It may be maybe a little trickier to grow 40% of your vegetables if you live in Manhattan. But many city lots have huge potential for actual direct food production. And so I'd love to see you guys get into those spaces. And those are places where I think education's really going to be key. You don't have to, teach me how to bring the stuff to a farmer's market. You don't have to teach me how to raise a cow. But if the median person in Grand Rapids really could see the potential of growing their own food, I think that's actually our biggest opportunity. So I'd love it if some more of your focus is on those kinds of activities, not the monetizable, business driven aspect of things.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I would just point out Objective 3 under Goal 1.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that's focused on promoting opportunities for people to grow, prepare, and share their own food.
Right.
And I would just also point out that the audience was the city of Grand Rapids and Kent County, so that's our focus.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly do see the need for us to be looking at the broader community and ways to promote growing, and that is something we try to go to the Urban Agriculture Committee at the city of Grand Rapids when we can, and I think Connie will speak more to that.
Commissioner Knight.
I'd like to hear from City Manager in response to my inquiry as well.
Sure, just real briefly. In my disclosure, I was not a farmer, but my parents were sharecroppers. My grandparents were. a couple of ways, intersections. I think investing in goal number 2 in local food economy certainly helps with thriving neighborhoods and business districts. The goal 3 around food waste and related solid waste, the climate adaptation, action and adaptation plan will inform that, and that's going to be integrated with the master plan. And then goal 4, protect and regenerate soil, water, and land. All of those are going to integrate into operational plans connected to the master plan.
Commissioner Knight.
I was just going to respond on somewhere along the line of what you said about the education, and I am a farmer too. Just throwing that out there. Yeah, as long as, and my family was as well. But I think the education piece is the hugest part. Going along with what Commissioner Perdue mentioned, the things that were running through my mind is what's happening right now, right, with people. And people were already struggling and being able to access their own. But in my former life, in teaching young people how to farm and grow their own food at home when they're living in an apartment or in a place that doesn't have much land in the backyard, and they don't really know how to do that. They don't understand that ketchup doesn't really grow on the shelf, that you actually have to grow the tomato to make it. And really doing some of that education to help people understand how I can do this for myself. And having access to that. But also, I saw that one of the things was to provide access to lower income families to the community food club, and that is a membership-based program, right? And so how do we get beyond that, right? If you're providing the access, but it's still membership-based, it's kind of like the, what's the place over there by Home Repair Services? The food club. Okay, I got issues with them. Sorry. Because if you have a person that is struggling and can't pay that $10, they shouldn't have to worry about paying that $10 to be able to access some food. And that was a struggle that I actually helped a family. I paid the money for them and was scolded a little bit for paying the money for them. If I ain't got $10, I ain't got $10. But if they have access to that food, we got to make sure that what we're doing, we're not creating more barriers for people to be able to access the things that they want just because we have a system set up, right? But education definitely is key in helping people understand, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. By the end of the day, we don't know what's going to happen by the end of the day, right? So I think a lot of that direction needs to be towards really educating people and putting a priority in helping people understand what they can do for themselves now and how to be able to support themselves in the near future.
Commissioner Robbins.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I'll keep it very brief, but just another example of conversations we're having that overlap with this area. I know the deer population too. You can grow your own food, but it's only as good as the deer don't come and eat it all before you get to it. So I know we've had some initiatives at the city level. We're working with the county, and hopefully we'll make some better progress on that this coming fall, but just wanted to make sure we don't lose sight of that and how that impacts this too.
Yep. Well, and my attitude always was that the deer are going to eat my crop. I get to eat the deer. So deer can actually eat things that we can't eat, like grass. So, they're a food source too. Anyway, so Ms. Bohach, did you have...
I think there's
I just wanted to add, if as a thought process, because I didn't get to say it earlier, that if there are barriers in any of our ordinances, that if I could direct the city staff to look at that a little and bring those forward. I know that we've had discussions in the past about chickens, animals. Can also provide, especially with cost of eggs, something sustainable. And I don't know if a lot of people know and understand how to use our ordinances, what's allowable, and what we could reduce barriers on.
Yep, and chickens are the world's best trash compactors. Commissioner Bohach. Commissioner Bohach.
Sorry.
Ms. Bohach. Whatever.
Okay, so there's a lot of conversation going on that I think can culminate into the work of the Urban Agriculture Committee, a committee that you have at your disposal. And in fact, on Wednesday of this week, we have a meeting, and a lot of this will be discussed. We will be looking at a crosswalk of what's in this plan, as well as the city's master plan and the climate adaptation plan. So we're looking at all of that, trying to figure out what are the actionable items in there, and then developing a sort of a strategic plan for the committee as we move forward in terms of what specifically they would be working on or could be working on. There has been zoning changes and ordinance changes as a result of their work previously in terms of a sort of a laundry list of recommendations that came in front of the City Commission. So there's been changes to beekeeping and the chicken ordinance and things of that nature. And so they'll be continuing to do that work and put a focus on all of these plans and figuring out how we can move forward. And of course, anything that's policy related at the city would come through the proper channels of any departments and to this body and moving those things forward.
Okay, thank you. In interest of time, we've got 10 minutes, I think, to do an update from our last briefing on community safety. And I'd like to move to that now so that we can, that's the continuation of the mid-year update, so that we can, then there's going to be a motion for closed session so we can discuss some legal matters. So.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Behrens will start us off highlighting the mobility strategic accomplishments, and then I will conclude with safety, and we'll make it real brief, and the department directors are here in the event there's additional discussion that you'd like to have.
Thank you. So just a reminder of the format here. First slide is always what we kind of said we were going to do when we adopted the budget. And then we kind of start to talk through what we've been able to accomplish so far mid-year. So there's some accomplishment here. Do want to point out that we have been able to get fully staffed on a couple of our teams. One of those, the traffic tech team, is one that is really important to responding to some of our neighborhood traffic calming requests. So I'm very excited about that being fully staffed in that area. Moving on, we won't go into a lot of detail here because we have heard a lot about these projects, and we'll hear more about our major road projects, 6 of them in particular, at the upcoming Commission Night Out. So I do want to flag the Rhoda-Millen resurfacing work is something that really is very important under our Vital Streets program, and is one of the key ways that we are able to deal with the useful life of our streets and fulfill that commitment to the voters when they adopted the Vital Streets millage. Want to talk a little bit about snow assist. It seems unimportant now because it's warm, but I do think it is something that delves a little deeper. I learned myself this year in following up with some questions that we received from the public about our sidewalk assist program in particular. So I just want to be clear, we do have now staffed up some sidewalk snow clearing capability, and map is available on our website, but it is an assist. And so I want to emphasize that for the public. So we break out those tools when we are able to, when snow fall has been more than 3 inches, and we use it to knock it down to about a ½ an inch. But we still rely on the adjacent property owners for ice removal, for the full removal of the snow. So it is emphasis on assist, and as folks in the public are walking through the city, if there are areas that are still difficult to clear, we do have a complaint process and an enforcement process. Obviously, we have to work in collaboration with Mother Nature on that one, and so sometimes clearance is lagging behind the actual snowfall. Just wanted to flag, we continue to see more and more uptake on ridership on Dash since we modified the route, so just wanted to flag that for the public. It continues to be a great asset to get around downtown and some of our closer in business areas, and we continue to support that. Moving very quickly, so obviously if there are questions, this slide is very data rich. I do want to flag the safety, obviously, as one of, and the foundational piece of our mobility system. We do track a number of data points about serious injuries, and then we break those out. So you'll see that under that strategic Priority Mobility 1.1, you'll see a lot of detail about those serious injuries and fatalities. I do want to just talk about this data is one of the key focus areas of our traffic safety program. So they are always looking at that crash data, looking for hotspots, and then using that to identify places where we need to come in with design fixes and other kinds of changes. And we leverage national highway safety dollars to be able to have our local dollars go further on some of those safety fixes. I also want to flag, for the benefit of the commission and the public, there was a deeper dive on kind of traffic safety programming altogether at the latest the February Mobile GR Commission. So I would recommend folks take a look at that if they're looking for more information. Also want to point out here our data point about good and fair on vital streets. Again, that is one of the places you'll see that in Mobility 3.1% of roads in state of good repair. So we were unable to update this slide, although I guess I could have managed it between the last presentation and this one. We are currently at 61%. You see there's a little dash right there. We are currently at 61%. So continuing our progress to make good on our 2030 goal of 70% good and fair. And then finally, just some key remaining initiatives for the year. Again, there will be a deeper dive on some of the enhanced community engagement work that we're doing around our significant roadway projects, particularly for this upcoming construction season at the next commission meeting. So hope folks will come out. We are doing a lot to beat the bushes for businesses and residents and others to come to that meeting as well to hear more and give us some feedback. We are also continuing the work with the Rapid and Grand Action 2.0 on those transformational projects of the amphitheater and soccer stadium. Obviously, those events will draw a lot of people downtown, and that will be a very urban mobility experience. So we are continuing to work with those partners on how to prepare folks for that and really lean into alternative ways to get to those facilities. And then I guess I will end with just a quick flag of the graphic you're seeing there. We have procured some additional software for parking and parking availability. So what you're seeing there with all the blue dots is really the functionality we are building. So that's a screenshot from another community, but it is the functionality that we are building, and really excited about this customer service tool moving forward. And so we'll have more to share on that at the end of the year. And with that, Mr. Manager, I'm going to turn it over to you.
If you can just advance the slides for me, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So we said we would focus on quite a few things in 25 for safety, staffing and vacancies in both police and fire department, as well as building new stations, as well as focusing on crime prevention and continuing to engage the community on our accountability, community-informed police training, supporting victims, as well as making sure people know their constitutional rights through the Know Your Rights campaign, as well as the Clean Slate Expungement campaign, and improving traffic safety. Next slide. So relative to the fire department, lots of funding support. We received $1.5 million for the training facility. The chief did update, I think it was Public Safety Committee previously, informing us that there has been some escalated cost increase due to inflation, and we are still working on the number, but the project is projected to be a little bit over. I said a little bit over. It is, I don't want to give out a number. It's projected to be over budget, but we're really trying to work and seeing what can be done to get us within our defined budget. The department has 19 recruits. We had a $3.1 million SAFER grant to help pay for 10 of those. What you'll see as we talk about the budget, there's a corresponding offset of overtime with the number of firefighters that we're able to have, and the department is going to be able to manage within its overtime budget this year, which is good, which is progress. And we also, many of you were there for the groundbreaking at the Kendall Street Fire Station. That seems to be progressing well. And you see some of the other support that we received from state on a state grant as well as federal grant for equipment. Next slide. Police Department also continues to focus on both sworn and non-sworn staffing. We had a $500,000 grant from the Department of Justice to help with violence against women, and we partner with Safe Haven as well as YWCA. Department has, appreciate the commission increasing staffing levels for non-sworn, hiring the second victim services coordinator, as well as you've heard the briefing, at least at Public Safety, about the expansion of the co-response and our collaboration with the Health Crisis Center, in which there were at least 92 people who were diverted from jail or the emergency room. And this was a pretty unprecedented election year, and we had several unexpected visits with short notice, and the department did a great job of keeping our community safe when there were known there were known incidents of violence and assassination attempts in other communities. One of the things that I'm really happy that's equipment improvement is the taser upgrade that the police department has embarked on, and simply I think the current taser has like a 21 feet or so range, and with this new taser upgrade, it almost doubles that range to over 40 feet, and so that allows officers to engage with less lethal force from a safer distance and not have as much immediate close encounter. You'll see the police staffing numbers, almost 290 officers. That may be outdated now. It's as of December 31st. But the police department, last we talked, is on the way to have, for the first time in many years, 300 people employed. And so we hope that will happen sometime this calendar year. Next slide. Yes, it's time. I'll just highlight a couple of things that the Office of Public Accountability has done. That we continue to make progress on the Clean Slate Initiative. Thank you, Mayor LeGrand, then Representative LeGrand, that led that legislative effort for the expungement legislation. And we have another fair that's going to be held in May of this year. But we've been helping quite a few number of residents, and they found it very valuable. You see the numbers totaling over 250 have filed application in courts across the state. And we continue to make progress with community-informed training. This is OPA collaboration with the community and the police department to help our department deploy training that is not just subject matter experts from law enforcement or mandatory training from law enforcement, but additional training that could be helpful in understanding the community in which they police, which is informed by residents and occasionally participated in with residents. So you see some of the collaborative trainings that were held over 16. Next slide. And we continue to operate with transparency. OPA issued the surveillance report earlier this year and did an update at Public Safety on it, as well as the collaboration with the Urban League and Cure Violence in trying to prevent interactions that lead to violence. And you see the number of interactions, over 2,600, and how many mediations. I want to call out, there were over 374 interactions that led to mediations with key individuals who would have otherwise been involved in conflict, and we would not have known how those interactions would have resulted in terms of outcomes. Next slide. Also, the OPA continues to work with the community on training and workshops. You'll see the work that's been done with the immigrant rights immigrant community, and from them knowing their rights, as well as just general Know Your Rights workshops. And you see several of them were initiated with over 261 people attending the January workshop alone. Next slide. And you'll see some of the key metrics. Green is good. Crime is going down in general, particularly the violent crime. And I think that's what you see in green, and the number of crimes against society, those are the non-violent ones. Next slide. and I won't go into detail on this slide, but you'll see the complaints, section 5.2, both complaints filed against police and fire department, as well as some of the other preventative measures around SEPTED. So in the essence of time, I know the mayor said 10 minutes. I will stop here, see if there's any questions.
Great. Thanks for the overview. I'm about to ask for a vote to move into closed session. So any brief comments? Commissioner Kilgore.
Yes, I'd like to hear more at another time, maybe at Public Safety, we can discuss that, of the pass rate for critical performance. That's the one that's red. I'd like to just hear more on that at a later time.
Okay, great. Seeing no one else, thank you for the briefing, and I would now like to entertain a motion to move into closed session for 2 items that our legal team needs to discuss with us.
So moved.
All in favor? Oh, no, sorry, roll call vote for this one. Mr. Clerk.
Commissioner Kilgore?
Yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes.
Commissioner Robbins?
Yes.
Commissioner Sassi?
Yes.
Commissioner Purdue?
Yes.
Commissioner Belcheck?
Yes.
Mayor LaGrand?
Yes, and we will be back for economic development, assuming that we ever get out of that room.
12:45.